anxious to get back home?
Well, yeah, like I got things to do. I told my kids February and March I'm gonna start going out doing activity now.
Mm-hmm.
Like I told, I don't know if you caught on, but I never went out in the land the way I wanted to for the last 3 years. Now I got my knee back
Nice.
and
Yeah.
I still got good health, a little slower, but I'm gonna start being active again. So I'm looking forward to that. Losing this dancing. Gonna be good like you, very trim and neat. Just, when you get my age, you move around and you're just too warm.
Yeah. Oh, actually,
I could start sweating just thinking.
too many thoughts. Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't we start with, like Dave mentioned,
Which one would you like to
that to me, I asked him, what kind of agenda we got here. And one of them he said was to about the book that I've got together, okay? Because I don't, I really tried to stress amongst all of the members on the table that I was the only signature Inuvialuk from historic past there.
Yeah.
Okay, I was the only one there, and I think if if I could just touch on what was the driving force of such determination board the elders and senior harvesters, the drive that they had, the character and the will and the determination, and basing their thoughts on what they've learned through their history and how they adapted and the severeness of the impacts and how they adjusted to that. I think briefly I can talk about that. So sort of give whatever I say after that, I draw from those.
Okay.
That's where I get all my energy and all my determination
Okay.
and focused.
We're talking about elders, harvesters around Pokiak Channel, or even farther.
Well, I don't think I want to go that far. I think I want to even, not. I don't want to concentrate on family matters. I know my history. I know the contribution, for instance, Boogie in making peace with the Indians when they were still fighting in the Delta every time they met each other. Okay, because of the diseases, right? People, both sides were losing people. And yet here's these healthy, young families meeting each other and fighting to the death, trying to wipe out each other.
Along that line, I think it's good. Along the line, because I know you then you can talk about, mention your book, or, and I think along the same line, you're trying to make people understand.
Well, I think when you talk about family stuff, like a lot of the families contributed. And I know some of those contributions of the other families, but I know my family line pretty well.
Okay.
And their contribution and how, as the descendant of that particular character, reflects on the children. I mean, that's very important. It carries on.
No, but I really do want you, if you don't mind, at some point, talk about IBC, because you're the only one that really kind of talked about it, how you were.
You mentioned that. I got it. I got it. You mentioned that to me. Like, you told me one thing, you don't have to repeat it to me because I receive it,
Yeah.
And I know I come here with the idea that, I will give you an idea, because it's a transition between the harvesting lifestyle and going into business while it was a big boom, and we're just late starters. And the perception of, like I mentioned, the governments and the oil companies, financial institutions, dealing with somebody that is land-based.
Is that a good start?
That's wonderful, yeah.
Okay.
Well, so, I don't have to formulate stuff. Like I told him, I have 35 years.
It's you. I want you talking.
Yeah.
Okay? And
Okay.
if you need a break, take a break.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I'll just talk a little bit about, how, you know, where we come from as Inuvialuit, who the Inuvialuit are, what kind of people they're dealing with. I mean, this was stressed in the showcase of Game Council on IDC, because they never knew what kind of character we had and our capabilities to adapt and learn, you know.
So
That's
I'll
great.
leave
Yeah.
you, I'll leave
Thanks,
you,
Maggie. Yeah.
because I wanna,
Because when you
I
talk
wanna
about
make you talk.
strength and determination that you saw as a young person, where did you see that? Who was doing it? Who inspired you?
Our history.
Yeah.
Inuvialuit, you know, the prophet that said these things are going to happen. So I had no question in my mind about it happening. Is it on?
Yeah.
It's on. Okay, I'd like to start with saying exactly who the Inuvialuit, historical Inuvialuit are. And the coastal Inuvialuit have always been in existence in our region for thousands and thousands of years. And our history goes back to the Inuvialuit, we call them, the first ones. You know, the Inuvialuit there had to be a people arriving to the Inuvialuit region, as we know it now. And the ones that are mentioned in stories are, what do we call a Inuvialuit, the ones before us, the ones that came to the ISR and made it their homeland. They found a homeland and how they developed themselves. And then the other one is the Inuvailuit, next to descendants of the Inuvialuit. And a lot of it was, I think the Inuvialuit, we got lots of legends from them because we don't know too much about them. But they had their struggles in going through many territories already occupied by other peoples. And they had to stealthily go through all of these groups of people to finally reach the Inuvialuit settlement region where there was no traces of human existence, no fire hearths, no evidence of a human habitation. And they arrived to that, and they made their homeland. They didn't have to worry about an enemy in the next around the hill or the next bend. There was nobody there, so they developed themselves, and their long odyssey or their long trek from wherever they came from had ended, and now they were saying, okay, this is our land. Just like the other groups of people we passed through our stealth through their land, and encounters with them, the battles that they had, and how they survived just to get here. And we have a lot of that history, and I think it's very important, you know, to start from there because, you know, you have Inuit right across the north and ourselves. We have survival tools, and they're very simple tools, but you can carry them. You know, everything that you can, or historically you can survive with for clothing, food, and shelter, they had in their survival kit, and you can carry it with you. So that you always had that security. All you had to get to know was exactly what was out there to harvest for food and for making shelters, making implements, making equipment, and it took time for them to develop that because they came from a land base. Now the ocean is right in front of them. It's a brand new environment. So they had to find ways to adapt to the ocean environment. And when they saw all those seals and whales, this was all new to them. Okay, so how do you get them? So they used the knowledge that's studying the wildlife, where they concentrate, where they're out of reach, for instance, in deep water. But some of them do come into shallow waters, which makes them vulnerable, you know, to experienced hunters. And so through time, the Inuvialuit they learn and adapted to harvesting and the mammals, and found the usefulness of not only food but also the byproducts of them. I mean, they already knew about caribou by the time they get you. amount of byproducts you can get just from one species. Okay, I mean, that was important to them. So it was not like they came here and all of a sudden, like coming from Africa, and they get dropped off in our area here. And there are two extremes of environments. And so on their trek over here, they were slowly adapting. And their survival tools was one of them, like going with, because they had to travel light in order to travel through any of the territories, which were very protective of their own homelands. And so they came here, and there was also some problems along the way from whenever they started their trek till they arrived here. Some legends talk about, how they went through there, what they learned from what the observations of the inhabitants of people, and how they used their scouts, not only in physical scouts, where a person used all his physical and mental ability as a human, as a scout. They also had spiritual knowledge that they had, and the limitations of also those spiritual beings that make one of their members a host, where they come in and you see all these spiritual activities going on. And there's a legend in that where they use both scouts, the natural scouts, which you could rely on, because the people work with spiritual things. They were very secretive. I mean, they should have been sharing their knowledge with what they know, but the spiritual world was in a conflict within their own world, the good and the bad. Okay, there's a conflict. There's no in between and saying, well, we'll make a compromise to get along. The spiritual world, as we know it, is either good or it's either bad. You will help those that you want to help because you're getting something out of them. But the good is one that more a free will choice. And once you had that free will implanted in you, fear is gone. So the spiritual people that we call Angatkut, they thrived on fear. That was their fuel. That was their food. The same way we eat food to survive, something to drink, to survive naturally, the spiritual world thrived on fear. The more fear that they produce amongst their own people, the stronger they get, because they're getting energy from that fear. And there were those Inuvialuit and other ones that are ordinary people that were unafraid. They conquered their fear. And because of that, the good side of it is they were protected from it. They were protected from the power of, the workers of these strange activities of the power of the Angatkut. And they're fearful. I mean, we still have them today. Our people, like they think it's from the past. But it is from the past, but these spirits never die. They continued on from the time they entered into one person and the person dies. Well, they train somebody else to take their place. The same way we're trying to, let our children and next generations in the present day take our place when we're gone. These people, spiritual workers, were the same way. They trained them, and because these were eternal beings. As humans, we have a lifespan, we die. And so these spirits want to continue to live on. So it's passed on to the next generation, to the next generation. And these are from way back. And the only time that we saw some evidence of the spirit world, because we knew that they were entering into some people and they saw performances. When an Angatkuk is trying to attract somebody they want to train, they got to be an interester. Even though they were Angatkuk, they still need to train somebody that had to control their will and their control their being, that free will, because you're under not good. They had a tough life. If they disobeyed the unctions of the spiritual being they call their helper, well, they got punished sometimes severely, and they have a disablement in their body for the rest of their lives. So he's a taskmaster. The other one is what we call an Inuvialuit, which were people that were good, and they were just wanted to be live out their life in the world, and they knew that through the spiritual things that was going on around them, they knew that there must be a life after death. And our burials from way back, they reflect that. They knew we were different from animals, that we were here just for a short time, but after we die, our napaktun, our soul, which the animals have this, they each got a spirit the same way we do, but the wildlife that was created of all sorts, they had no soul. We knew we had a soul way back then. And that was the one that was sort of like an emptiness, a craving. That soul was seeking knowledge, seeking knowledge, seeking knowledge. And the more, this is why the human can adapt to any environment. They can adapt to the land, they can adapt to the ocean. I mean, we're the only species that can do that. We can't even go in the air now. So our people have observed all these things and learned from them. But they didn't understand the spiritual world, and at times the spirits revealed themselves to certain people that opened themselves to them. And after all the knowledge they had, where in the legends where the animals and the wildlife used to communicate at one time. This is why Native people know so much about the species of wildlife that they had, because some of that information about them that they learned, they kept. And there's another legend why we're not able to physically communicate with wildlife anymore. But this can't be spiritually done yet, because through time we have learned about the ultimate good spirit. And even before the missionaries told us about God in the Bible, our people were trying to find out, well, which spirit is the most powerful amongst all spirits. The same way in a group of about 40, 50 people, in your group, who is the most knowledgeable, who is the most powerful. Okay, so the spirit world had that same parallel world. And at times, just like a door opens and you see into that world. And when people are searching for something, that their search starts them on a journey, and then it opens up because they're receptive to getting that knowledge. And they learned all about everything that surrounds them, the oceans, the land, plants and animals, everything that is there. But there were still, in our legends, that Inuvialuit were still wondering, trying to understand the spiritual side. And so they started gazing up into the skies, and they see all these moving objects. Stars, the moon, they see shooting stars or whatever meteorite that they say that skims through and they get a quick glimpse, short glimpse of them. And the only thing that they didn't know about the universe was what you saw up there, and it looked endless. It was an endless space. But and through time, all what goes on up there affects the earth. So the cosmos and anything up there affected the earth. and things are going right all of the time. But sometimes trying to get a name for who's the one up there, because he was way up there, that spirit must be pretty powerful if it could control all the weather systems. Anything that happens on the earth with weather, with each season, somebody had to have control of it. And if all goes well, things work well. But sometimes our religion says that we make the sila mad, human, make the sila mad. And that most powerful spirit for our people was the sila, means not only the outside that we see around us, but including the heavens. So that was one legend. I mean, this is very important for us to know that, because we live at a time when people are searching. Some of them don't believe that there's life after this. Well, it's their option. But others says, okay, well, there must be something to it. And our people have adapted to both. Could I? I'll just shut my stuff off here. I got to take a break at 12,
Sure.
before 12. Could I just answer?
Yeah, feel free.
Shut it off. Wait. We'll go back to, cause Dave, you gotta bear with me, okay? Because what I'm telling you now, it was really important throughout our negotiations, because we drew from that information. And I'll just get back to Silla for a while. And when humans, because of their behavior, because of their mistreatment of, the way they handle animals, the way they treat the environment, somebody got to teach them a lesson, and a harsh lesson, so they will never forget. And Silla provided that. When the weather come in and you have extraordinary weather that's never been seen before, to the extreme, everything, the land, the wildlife, the human, are made subject to that weather. Everything from Silla. Just what the Silla provided and produced, everything got affected. Okay, well, it creates a hardship for everybody, everything. And so when they get back and the weather is gone, starts going back to normal, well, you have to evaluate exactly what you have left. Like if your board was full and it got tipped over and everything drifted out and all you got is what you got left, well, that's because of our behavior, that cost it. So let's start over here and let's go on with life again. And so it's very, Silla played a very important role in controlling them. Weather is all, you hear that phrase, weather is the boss. The weather is the boss. And it's still that way. The weather is the boss. Whether we move around or not, or stay and wait till the storm passes, because any kind of storm, no matter how long it lasts, there's an end to it. Okay, so I think this is where, a lot of the patience come in, where you don't try to fight the elements. You work with them. You submit to the elements. But when the things go right again, then you can go about. Because all that time that you're weathered in, a lot of things are going through your mind. How can we best adapt? You're sort of reassessing yourself. Anybody. When you got a lot of time to think about the things, and you're starting to, and each time you weathered in, your mind and yourself mentally grow a little bit stronger and get rid of the bad things that occupy your mind. Get rid of them. And once you do that, you're more free. Once your mind is, if you hate somebody for such a long time and then all of a sudden you got rid of the hate, man alive, new things open up. And that's just one example. There's a lot of other things that you hate. I don't like the way that guy is doing his stuff. I don't like the way that woman treats his family and kids. Huh? You know what I mean? Those are the things that occupy the mind. But once you get rid of all those and let them live out their life and not, us not trying to change them because we can't change a person. We can't. They got to change themselves. But you could change yours. So the character and of the Inuvialuit was that. They just look upon themselves. What can I contribute for our people? What can I, as a person, individual, contribute? And that was the whole thing about the character of an Inuvialuit. Because you need other people around you. It's good to have other people around you. And if somebody is too opposite of what you're trying to do or too aggressive and wanting his own way, well, you let them go and find somebody else their own kind, you know, and see how they make out. So they had groups of people that, you know, that associate with somebody that they want to center around. And that became a core group of a family group, extended family, that you hear about. And that produced, because of the family group, that produced, when the civil Inuvialuit came here, that mentality produced clan mentality. Got to protect my family. Got to protect my ilaks. Got to protect my cousins. If another family goes against one of our members, well, they got to deal with the whole extended family. That's clan mentality. And our people adapted to that. We have they stopped. ISR is one big space of land and waters and offshore, and people made use of that. But within that Inuvialuit Settlement region, even now as we know it, we have 13 subregions. Each region is different from another. You could go to the coast, there's one kind of environmental terrain you got. You go across Husky Lake, you could see plants and other stuff. You can't see in the coast. You go further along the coastline where there's sand and the terrain changes and vegetation reduces, but there's still some vegetation there that attracts the resident animals that stay here year round, because a lot of the wildlife is migratory. But each environment has their resident species, you know. And so the ISR environment, the lands and waters, is I call them subregions of the ISR. And each group had that. And each clan, at that time we might have had, after the civil Inuvialuit came and they were starting to see all this, the wildlife showed them where their habitat are, because in order for for them to survive, they have to know the behavior and movements of the wildlife. Whether it's fish, whether it's geese, whether it's land animals, whether it's the ocean. The only way you can really truly benefit is if you understand them. And if you study them and observe them after your hunting is done. Even today, like if you go hunting, it's very challenging sometimes. After you get whatever that your requirements are, you quit hunting, all of a sudden these wildlife is all around you, very close. You can observe them. They could feel that they have no more threat from the human, because your mind is not on harvesting them. So when they get that kind of New York, we call it, New York means almost, tame is not a proper word for it, but New York is, they get comfortable with you being there. And you're able to observe what they're doing, their movements, their behavior, between the interactions between the species. Just one species, what they do, and our people learn from that. And this knowledge is what we became traditional knowledge, just ITK. Any of our traditional knowledge comes from what we observed and our people shared their observation. Out of about 100 hunters, at that time, you may have one person observing this, bring it back, and he tells about it. Okay, well, the other hunters are saying, hey, maybe I can try that sometime. Why don't I not just go out and hunt and kill and get what I need and get out of there? Why don't I stay a little longer and just observe? Not hunting, just observing. So it just takes one to start it, and then you have all these other people doing it. Okay, so, and it's not only wanting to know about the environment and the wildlife behavior, but it also provides a relaxing time. The more you get to know about that species, the more you know assurance within yourself. If you respect their behavior and their life and the life of the species, there's always hope for you. So it's very, and then this is where the conservative measures that our people had in order to make sure that the wildlife was looked after, and we just get what we need. And even when you historically get what you need, the way a family handles the byproducts, whether it's meat or other byproducts of the wildlife they harvested, if it's not treated, if they don't treat it with respect, that family has a hard time with that species because, the species, they have a protection of some kind too. And if they got to get their self straightened out in order to get back that relationship with that. But if there is disrespect, it becomes very hard for the wildlife. Our people are always saying, when I talk about wildlife right now, if I talk about polar bears, whale seals, they're hearing me. I mean, it's built in all of us. So when we talk about these animals, we got to talk with respect. You make fun of them, you're going to get a good lesson. I mean, you'd be lucky if you get away with your life. That's how powerful I think the relationship that our people, traditional knowledge that keeps us straight in the straight and narrow in regards to wildlife and our adaptation to benefiting from them. And they will give themselves. Like if you really want something, and even it's off season, and you really need something, the species you're thinking about just shows up. You open the door, it's right there. So there's that relationship that's unexplainable that happens to certain individuals, not everybody, but certain ones. And and you can speak to the animals. Like I've spoken to polar bears, I've spoken to six, I've spoken to mice, and because they were because like just take for instance mice. Okay, I have a cabin I built earlier in my young life. Insulation, I put poly on it outside it, so it's nice and warm. But I'm so busy trying to get trapping, I never put the boards on. Okay, so I go home next spring, next fall I come back. Now you have all these mice, mice all over the place. Mice don't bother me because I'm a trapper. I can go to sleep and mice can run all over me and I don't wake up because I need my rest. But other my family members can't. And they're noisy, but through your life experience, because every time you set up camp, igloo or tent, and you're going to have a rest, it's dark. Under the snow you're laying on, you start hearing all these mice under there, right? Under the snow. They're very noisy. And anyway, they got their own habit, and this time a bunch of mice was all over the place. And when I got up, the people I was, my family was complaining about, I got to get rid of all this. And so I was going to go hunting caribou, and my wife was going to punch doe, and well, before I go out, I'm killing all this, whatever I could see. Try to ease her mind. And finally, we're going to have breakfast. And she said, like I hate all these mice in here. And everybody got, like everybody else was getting squirmish. Anyway, I said, okay, let me try something. Let's pray. Let's say grace for this food. And we started off saying grace, and I said, okay, after the saying grace for the food, I said, and I told my family, I'm going to talk to these animals like our people say we could talk to them. This is my first experience in talking to wildlife. We could talk to them, Our history says we can actually talk to them. So I turned my attention to the mice. I said, all you mice in here, when God made you, you got fur, and this house was not here. You lived out there. As humans, we need the space. Give us the space. You go back out there and you're not out of house and home. The outside world is your house and home. Anyway, amen. And my wife is punching dough, and I'm out getting some caribou that I wanted to get. And it's all in the fall, it's all on foot. So she's punching dough, and she sees a mice, shows up, she kills it. Another mice shows up, she kills it. And she forgot about her punching dough because she was killing mice. And so she said, boy, everything I kill is heading for the door. She says, well, let them go out then. So she started punching her door and working on the door. And mice after mice was going out the door. So we have that. Like, I can talk about that with certainty because I've got witnesses to those, And we had no more mice in the house because knowing our ITK, and if you practice it with a true sense of sincerity, you're capable of doing that. And I've done that with like 6'6", and with, like I say, polar bear that was going to take my dog food, and I needed my dog food, and I didn't want to kill it. But that was an experience. And I had it with my son. I walked up to that bear with no gun because just the way he behaved, I knew that there was a connection here. So I could go talk to it. And there was no fear, nothing. And I walked to about 8 feet of it, and I'm talking to it, and I'm saying, look, I need my dog food, leave it alone. And I had 5 pails of oxok blubber for my dogs, And he looked at me after a while, that bear, and this is so character about a bear. He looks at me, and is, trying to, and I'm talking to it. And I wanted to get away. I said, I need that dog food. But what he did was, with one pail, there's a handle on the side of the pail. He takes his paw, lifts it up, bites that handle, starts walking away with the pail. I never saw that pail. I chased after him, wanting him to drop it. But it must have been really interesting for my son to see me doing all this. But here again is trying to teach your family ITK. I got this information in ITK. I rely on ITK, and I talk about it to my children. But they actually see somebody performing the ITK. Anyway, all that is from the civil duty wood. And I think the most extreme, they learned a lot in their trek, in their searching for a homeland. And when you're in enemy territory, the last thing you want to do is build a fire. Smoke of it travels long distance. You can even see visual on it sometimes. So, in order to traverse over enemy territory, don't build a fire. So they need to eat. They started eating their food raw. They started making, because they needed extra food, they dried it, make it lighter. Okay, so this is where, to us, the eating of raw meat started, They developed it for us. And they were, because of them having all the nutrients that they eat from the wildlife, eating it raw. These guys got, our people described them as supermen, superhuman beings. Very powerful physically, mentally, and even spiritually. They were very extreme at the very top level. And they could perform because of the food that they ate gave them all that physical energy, mentality. So our legends say that when somebody disobeys, like I want to eat my food cooked, takes off and where nobody sees him and builds a fire and eats, he jeopardizes that whole group just by that one person's actions. And so when he comes back and you have to fight their way out and get moving very quickly again, they get that person aside and says, we told you not to do that. You did it. Either you listen to us or you go on your own. You can't be with us anymore. We can't. We can't trust you. You want to have your own, do your own thing, well, you don't jeopardize us. If you don't walk away, you're going to be killed. You're going to be executed because you jeopardized, the people. And so this kind of extreme capital punishment was practiced even to our recent history about our people. It was very important. And that was the extreme. And you tried to counsel them before you did that, but still they won't listen. And because of the decision of the people, the elders, and they couldn't be counseled to change their mind, they knew they're going to be executed. They never resisted. They accepted their fate. They accepted the one that, and that was the extreme. So there was a governance already developing way back then for our people. How you behave and conduct yourself as a member of the group. So there was that development that was taking place when they got here. They practiced some of those really extreme things for the survival. They continued to practice that. And so they developed and established themselves here. And lo and behold, when they came to the Inuvialuit region where there's barren grounds and tundra, no trees along the coastline, reached the beach and here's all this wood in the beach. I mean, all this driftwood, which was denied them from making fire. All the time they traveled, the wood was there now, and they can work with the wood. They can make fire anytime they want. They can eat their food raw, dried, cooked, So it was a blessing. And our settlement region takes in all of those shorelines, not only from the Mackenzie River, but we got other rivers, some of them large, some of them medium large, that have headwaters in the tree line. And they bring the wood down, okay? So we had good access. And not only that, there was so much wildlife. We had wildlife coming to you when they're coming to go to their critical habitat and on their way back again. And they had staging areas. Observations of those things made our people exist today. And they grew in number because you're in safety now. Children can grow up from a child to adulthood more easily. And they learn how to, when they got into sea mammals especially, like the beluga whales, I don't know, there must have been a lot of people that died of botulism because they were just learning how to, but they know it tastes good, but and you eat good with it, but the odd time somebody dies from it. Well, what? They never said, okay, well, we'll just leave that. And they observed and they go backtrack, and they say, well, this is how they were preparing the food, and through time you find out how you can ferment food and it's still edible without hurting you, without killing you. So all that was developed, and it was all short time. It never happened, going to college and university and that. It was all practical knowledge, but you learn from every loss of life, and you try to not to repeat the same mistakes of somebody else or somebody in your path. So all these kind of principles is what I'm trying to bring across here is that the coastal Inuvialuit, when everything was going on and we were impacted by all these Kablana coming in with different interests, we were able to adapt because we had counsel and direction from people before us. When a civil duty was established here, well then the Inuvialuit, this is where you start changing. You don't have to learn about the lands that they traversed over to be free to live. Now everything is centered on just their homeland. And these are the ones you're calling Inuvialuit, the ones from long ago. Not the civil duty with that first ones, all right? Inuvialuit, which means the ones from long ago and how they developed. And this is where the clan mentality came in. And there was clan wars, clan feuds, and we almost lost in our history Anderson River because of those clan feuds. And because of nobody occupying that Anderson River area, Indians started coming all the way down to the coast on their war parties. And this is why you hear some Indians saying, well, we got use, we got land use, and our people went right to the coast. Yeah, they came right to the coast to kill people, but not to occupy. And so that was jeopardized. So the clan mentality did that. And so there was, and this, I'm not going to go through the story, but because I've got it written down. But only one member of a clan escaped from Anderson River, and his sole responsibility was to get revenge. That's clan mentality. You could die trying to get your revenge. And that's what happened. And this guy used all his skills, both physically and how it's been taught on spiritual side. And his job was to get that Kitigagu clan, because they're the ones that came across with all a bunch of other clans, forcing them to join, and they went against, and they were going to wipe out all of Anderson River clan. And only one survived. And he was going to get revenge. And the way it turned out is, end result was that he came right into the sod house of the clan leader and his son and his bodyguards was in his sod house. And that was going to be his revenge, getting at the instigators of the people that just wiped out his family and, died doing that. And the elder also, the clan leader, been thinking about, while all this for many, many, many years of this guy getting revenge and trying to get access, find a way to get access to the sod house of the Kitigagu clan leader. And it took many, many years how to get to that house. With all of the other sod houses, all of the people that lived around there, the satellite camps, dogs, how can you get past all that to get to the house? And he did it. But he had to adapt to certain things to get into the sod house. And that clan leader that fought against his own clan and he being the only survivor, when he saw him jumping, showed up in the sod house, the story goes, all he said was, "Ara!" And it was not a surprise. It was not a... and his son and his bodyguards will go into action right there, I mean, automatically. But when he showed up, just that word, hurrah, it's an expression of saying, boy, I thought about you for a long time and you're finally here. I mean, that's the expression. And that expression stopped the other people from going into a battle mode. Everybody was... And he talked to him and he says, look, we made a mistake. I made a mistake. I thought about it a lot, and you killed all my leaders as they went out of the sod house after the morning meeting. One by one, you kill them all. The sub-leaders of his whole clan. They walked in, and as they come out, and after he killed them all, only those 4 were left in there. And that was his revenge. And he said, look, if you just listen to me, just give me a chance to speak. He says, you will have your chance to fight if you still want to. But it's going to be one-on-one with those guys. There's going to be no gang. And if you kill all my son, if you kill my bodyguards, and I'm the only one left, the instigator of all this, I will accept my execution without resistance, because I jeopardized by my actions, I jeopardized his clan. I jeopardized all the other clan members. Now we have Indians coming in the Anderson River area going right to the coast. We got to reoccupy that area. And he says, you're the only survivor that knows that area the way it should be known. Why don't we start over? He said, what I'm telling you now, he said to that young man, middle-aged man now. He said, I made a mistake and I regretted it. But this is what I propose. He said, if you accept my offer, we'll abolish clan mentality. We'll get rid of that man, people belonging to each clan. Start your life over. Get a wife. Go back to Anderson River, and from the clan members, we'll make sure that you have a group of people over there that you can re-educate them about the ISR or the Anderson River area. And this is where the Inuvialuit became a people. Not clan people, but a people. And it was no more barter and trading between clans. It was everybody making sure they continue to do what they do, to have all the resources, and they shared it. No barter and trading. What is the requirement? They meet together once a year, and they say, well, my clan needs this, and I'm way over here, but I need products from over there. Like, I don't want to go over there and hunt because it takes up too much time. You spend more time traveling than hunting. So you continue to do that, and we'll gather once in a year, and then we'll share everything. This is where the Inuvialuit became the Inuvialuit, the real people. Not the real clan members, but the real people. This is where, the Inuvialuit changed to develop their governance. The governance of Inuvialuit changed from Inuvialuit mentality of clan mentality and became one people, as a governance. And they developed that. And that's what was produced for us. And we had numbered in the thousands before the Europeans came. And I'll just give you a little bit of an idea about the part of those that saw visions and saw into the future. Because it's very important for us to know that. Could we take a break? Could I go outside for a while?
Yeah. We'll have a smoke.
You don't?
Break.
Yeah.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay, I spoke about the Inuvialuit, and there's long stories about it because our people are historians, even way back then. our sociologists and our psychologists of how you socially developed was developed way back then. And they might not take a college or university training, but they had the practical experience of just being human and how they deal with human interactions. And so we had all of those professional people, professional storytellers, professional historians. And by the time the Inuvialuit established themselves to be Inuvialuit, you had all these specialty people, professional specialty people. And when they started gathering together and they're starting to formulate their governance and how they react, and they had some hiccups along the way. And they had to deal with those hiccups. But they dealt with them, and they gave us a governance that ended up to the governance that our people had that the white man didn't recognize when they came into the area. But we had our governance. The government could have their parliament all they want, but we also have our own governance. And you have to make these two governance and just time and age to cooperate and work together, putting the two together to see what, for our people here, reflect our governance of the Inuvialuit settlement region. And our final agreement, once it's fully implemented, it's going to take into account all of those self-governance and taking control of our lives back. But it started way back then with all the lessons learned through history. And the civil duty, with how the stories came about, the civil duty, with which I briefly just gave you an introduction to, was based on those historians that talked with each other, not just one. And there's all kind of versions of how the stories are told, because each historian have their own specialty department, and they're different people. But when they get together, they share what they thought about from the last time they discussed this, from the years before, and all the year, after the discussions, they go home, wait for another year, but their mind never stops. They continue to, like they say, walk a mile in a shoe. If I was there at that time, with what I know about our character and our personality and the ones before us, they walked a mile in their shoe, and in this case, thousands of miles probably, and through many, many, many generations. And so there's a lot of stories about ITK, about the civil duty, because in order for them to understand their history, they knew that the civil duty were the first ones here, and we became the descendants of them. So let's not forget about those. And you have anthropologists and archaeologists trying to find out about all these native people. Well, I don't have to find out where I come from. I know from our historians, even before they established all these educational institutions. They were taught through the generations to people before me. And I caught, you might say, the tail end of it. And myself, in my years, trying to explain when people ask, who are the Inuvialuit? Well, I still had access to not only being taught in the old school of learning of our traditional knowledge and all of the aspects of life, right, from hunting to environment to dealing socially with your people around you, how you behave, and how you conduct yourself in life. But the whole purpose here is to be yourself. And the society needs a real variety of people. I mean, large variety. And you draw and you put it together and say, okay, this is what we've got here. You know, it's like Apollo 13, you know, Houston, we got a problem. Well, what do you have in your spaceship there? What do you have to get, air it back into the, you know, to their spaceship? And if they didn't come up with the proper, using exactly what they had within reach of themselves, they were able to get air back and come back to Earth alive. So the same way with our people, they looked around and they said, "What do we have here? You know, we need to survive here. What do we have?" And you pulled it all, and there was different expertise in there. And our people developed the same way. They looked around and they saw the resources, and if they didn't have the resources within the area, you bartered and traded for those resources. I mean, this is a human thing. And other people need resources from you while you bartered and traded for them. I mean, so this has been developed. When trading deals is not new to us. Dealing with other societies is not new to Inuvialuit historically. And these historians, you know, when they had all this in place already, when they became one as an Inuvialuit. And it was more sharing of knowledge just now. Nobody trying to reserve for somebody to get information from you and use that information against you. Now it was one people. You became one. And all that information was for the benefit of an Inuvialuit society that developed after that. And there was, after all the governance was, you know, established, just dealing with Inuvialuit and our neighbors, all that was already developed. And now, there was, here I'm going to talk a little bit about the visionaries, the Nakuyualui that had visions. Every once in a while they have a vision. And usually when there's going to be a glitch in migration of the animals, any species, or the behavior of the animals going to change to adjust to their environment. Because like in the ocean, for instance, every storm, every thaw in the spring changes the environment close to the areas of harvesting areas and the shoreline. And so the wildlife, when they come back every year, they have to make an adjustment. Sometimes it has to be a drastic adjustment. So the behavior becomes a little bit more difficult. And usually, and that's going to happen, and Nakuyualui has a vision. This is the year, in that season, this is what's going to happen. And he sees it just like somebody watching TV. Vision is there. He sees everything. And he shares it with his people. This is what's going to happen. Now, we have to prepare for it. If there's going to be less of this harvesting while the behavior of wildlife changes, while they're trying to adjust, we have to readjust and getting our alternate foods that we're going to be losing from that specific season. So these visionaries were very important to us, and they not only explained tell about the vision, but they also explained how to handle the situation and what should be done. These are the things that should be done, even before it happened. If they start seeing these signs happening and his vision becoming reality, well, we better not waste time. We already know what to do, because the visionary counseled them. And after so many visions through his lifetime, every time his vision come to pass, you rely on his vision to help continuation of our people in a normal state. And this one particular visionary, like I know his name because his name was so important to our people. These visionaries, they have a vision for a season, maybe for the next year, maybe for the next 5 years, but you know, but this visionary went far beyond that. He was going on in years, getting older, and in his mind he starts saying, I wonder if, like what's going to happen to our people once I'm gone, once all of these other Nakuyolud that saw visions, if they're gone. Because it never happened every day. It happened only when it's required. They see these visions. And his name was Isalak. And when he was born, time to give him a name, the custom of our people was that when a child is born, the elders come and they look at every other person that died that year he was born. And they said, well, we got to give him a name. Let's keep that name going. Because the names were very important at that time. A name given to a child, the Inuvialuk name they gave them was very important. It was like keeping a language going. Pokiak. My name is Pokiak. I know what meaning of that word. I'm the keeper of that word. I'm the one that knows the meaning of Pokiak. Somebody else's name, something else. They're the keeper of that word. And so we had no writing system on that, but the language, people thought that it's going to continue on forever and ever the way it was. But we find out today that it was not going to be like that. And so when Isalak was born, elders came and they look at him and they watched him. I mean, just like anybody, you take a newborn baby, you watch him and see if he's sleeping or moving around. Well, these elders have many years of experience where they watch this, and the main focus is to see, just from what they were observing in that short time, the kind of character this person might be like. What would be specialty in life? And that way, as the child grows and they start seeing it, what they thought of him right from the beginning, the kind of character is going to be, well, then the elders and the parents and the parents' generation, they know all about every child that's born, and we got to shape that child's life, whether it's a boy or a girl. And so these elders came and they started looking at him and they're saying, what kind of name to give him? They thought about all the people that died, discussed it, and they said, after they make a consensus, they go to the parent and they say, his name is such and such. And when that baby heard that name, starts crying, can't stop crying. Okay, the elderly elders that were there kicked him right away. No, this one baby is searching for a name. His name going to have a purpose. He wants that name. And so they start naming all of the dead people that passed away, still crying. They name all the Ingatkut that were, in their past, still crying. Named all the Nakuyolud that they know of that died in the past and said that name, he's still crying. So, okay, they said, this child wants his own name. We got to think of a Inuvialuk word that will satisfy him so he calms down and be satisfied with the name. And it's just newborn. And so they started rattling off all kind of names to the child. And one of the elders said, Isalak. Soon as he heard the word Isalak, stops crying. And so it was very amazing. It's eerie feeling, probably. And so they started rambling up all kind of names again. Baby starts crying again. And soon as one of them said, Isalak, stops crying. Looks at the parents and says, his name's Isalak. This guy's going to be, he wanted his own name for some reason, And so they developed him to be a child, and he became a normal person. And once in a while he sees visions when he became of age to have, know about life in a greater extent, probably about 35, 40 years old, and then he starts seeing these visions. And his visions always come to pass, and it's very serious stuff. And then finally one day he had a vision. And how a vision starts is, for people, and any occupation, you got to focus your life on something that's bothering your mind and you want answers to. Because there's a concern there. It just develops in any human being. There's something that develops and say, I want to do this, I want to do this. And he was concerned about the future of the Inuvialuit, right? After the Inuvialuit became one, the new governance started, and there was, like I say, hiccups. As they progressed through generations of being one, from clan mentality to being an Inuvialuit as one group. So it takes time for people to socially accept stuff, and there were some hiccups, like I say, and it concerned him. He might have been a sociologist, for all I know, because he was dealing with a lot of these social issues that, that they were bombarded with, and how could we deal with those things? And so it bothered him, and in order for him to see the vision, it has to be real focused. It must be broad starting, and then he starts saying, "I'm getting older now. And I'm getting more concerned because, I want to help them, but I got no power." And so he's really concentrating on it, on his problem, meditating on it, consuming his mind. And then one day he had a vision. And his vision troubled him. And the character of somebody that saw a vision, because visions are in such a way that you see things, and it's in warp speed, These visions, everything that you're seeing and hearing and everything is in a warp speed. What might take me a long time to explain this, these visionaries, they could see it and they could understand it in 1 minute. That's warp speed, And so he's seen this vision, and the character of a visionary that saw a vision, the way they act after they see the vision, they got to have time for it to sink in themselves. They got to have time to say, okay, I not only saw the vision, now I got to give counsel as to how I'm going to after I express my vision, and the counsel that I'm going to give after that. Well, it troubled him. And so the character of what he did was just like the same character of as a hunter that want to go out on a hunt by himself. The day before he leaves, he puts everything in order, all the things he needed. When he gets up in the morning, all he got to do is pick up his stuff and it's gone. Because he knew what mission he was going to go on. Equipment was there, he prepared him all that he needed, and he was gone. Before anybody wakes up, he's already gone. Well, in the Inuvialuit, when they see a vision, was very similar. And they take off. And they go with nothing. They just get up, walk, because he's got to be alone. He's got to have solitude. He's got to get away from all noises and people talk. And he goes off, and a vision like that, what he had was associated with visions was that there is some, you might say, fasting to sharpen your wit, to sharpen your mind. The less of all of the things that bothers you in your body is gone. Now you're focusing on just a vision. As you're getting hungrier and hungrier, or longer you go without food, and it don't bother you. Way of eating, what you're going to eat, what you're going to do is gone, because you're in your solitude now. Visionaries have to get into that solitude. And then from there, that's where the words for counseling comes in. Because there's no distractions of, I got to eat this, I got to drink that. I got to go and have a wash in the stream. No, he's there just being in solitude and submitting to what he saw. And words to explain starts coming to him. And just easily, what he had seen was, in his aged years, far into the future. Far, far, far into the future. And in his vision, he had seen the Qabluna first arriving. The explorers that were not even there yet. White man that's never seen before. And he had to give the Qabluna a name. Like, these are strange people, strange dress, strange equipment, using Indian guides. And these people were strange in appearance. And some of those explorers, Qabluna I saw, had eyebrows right across the forehead, connecting hair right across. So he said, Qabluna, that's what he called them. And that name stuck with our Inuvialuit since that time, white man, come from the outside, Qabluna. Well, in his vision, he saw early explorers and how it's going to impact our people just by their presence. After that, he saw fur traders, people that wanted to trade for the fur that people use for equipment, clothing, and shelter, and these traders were interested in the fur trade. Then they saw the white trappers way before they came. He saw in the mainland, he saw after the fur traders and white trappers, he saw the missionaries. Missionaries coming in, and they're totally different from the fur traders. They're not interested in the fur. They're interested in your napaktun, your soul. Like they're not there to try to take resources from the land. They're there concerned about and trying to get them for you to get your soul to believe what they're teaching spiritually. So he saw the missionaries coming in. Then he saw the whalers that came in from the east and came and started hunting the bowhead. He saw these big boats they came with. And, the boats that our people had at the time were called umiat. And every leader in the camps had a umiak. And when they have it, upside down outside their sod house. When you go into that camp, you know exactly who the leader is by that umiak that's outside of his house, because they use it once in a while. And he said those umiak could be anywhere from 50, to 60 feet long and about 6 to 7 feet wide. And they were made, and they were big, in the minds of those people, these were big boats. And it says these whalers, when they come, they're going to focus on the bowhead whale. And they come with boats that are not even made with skins, and they have lots of people on top of the boat. They have umiat, size of our umiat that our people use on top of the boat. So it's a big boat. So he saw that. He saw the whalers even before they come, and how it's going to impact the Inuvialuit. Okay? After that, he saw the Northwest Mounted Police, a governance from outside of the area, coming in. And they had a different interest. They were not interested in fur. They were not interested in Napaktun. They were interested in controlling the actions of people. It was like a justice system. He saw that. And he saw because after that, he saw these people, he said, all the white people that come in up to that point in time, all the Inuvialuit, all the Indians, they got to show a sort of respect, because if you don't follow what they say or the governance that they had, they could be real friendly, and if you break their laws, all of a sudden they become vicious. You could be feeding them and talking to them normally, but once you break a law, they had a system where, okay, that was a totally different, you got to deal with that social issue. Their countenance changed, the way they talk changed with authority. He saw that with the police force that came in. And then after that, he saw an introduction to the governance from outside of the area, not Inuvialuit governance, a governance from these white people from the south. Because our people were wondering, before the Northwest Mounted Police come, just to fast forward it a little bit, they were wondering, all this going on, and we had our governance. These people had these different interests, and all they do is look after their own, and who the hell is their leader? As a collective people, who's their leader? Then our Northwest Mounted Police shows up, and everybody else showed respect, and they got to follow their word. And so they thought it was like they're going to have governance now. But Inuvialuit also saw the introduction to the governance from outside, which surprised him. Because and he'd been seeing the government entourage that were signing treaties with the Indians, and they reached McPherson. And now when they reached McPherson, they were saying, okay, there's another group of people down here, and the government and their stupidity, they thought that, oh yeah, they're next door to these Indians, so these must be Indians too. Okay, well, we're signing treaties with Indians. Let's go sign a treaty with them. And so he saw all of that. It was very brief, but he, in his council, he also said, these police force, these people with authority to control social lives, these were also subject to the entourage that come. Like, they were not the governance. These guys had a governance and were told to do stuff from outside. And they saw it, and it was very brief. and they tried to get our people to sign a treaty. And Inuvialuit said, no, our people won't sign a treaty because that's going to infringe on our society. And they're not going to sign that treaty. No matter how much pressure they got, they won't sign it. They'll find a way out of it. The elders will find a way out of it. And he left it at that. But in his vision, he said, they won't lose control of our homeland. And these guys were trying to get control of our homeland. Not the people, but our homeland. And then he saw our people having to adjust to another way of life. And that's where he said, you're gonna become like two people in one. You're gonna be the same people, know all the land and about the wildlife. But these guys will come in here and they're gonna be working. Like he saw the army camp, he saw the dune lines being developed. That's where the wage economy comes in. That's where he said, people are going to make a choice as a person. Are you going to live? Which one are you going to choose for occupation? And once the wage economy started, she's seen the small entourage, the governance that he saw, the treaty signing entourage. He saw those kind of same people establish themselves here. And they had two types of governance. One is to deal with the people that are around there, and the other one is like a governance. It's like a parent. He's responsible for everything. And you never even seen the federal government. I mean, this Israel way back then, he never saw the federal government and the territorial government because his vision was for the area. We don't know the area beyond our homeland. All these visionaries were focusing on our homeland, not to infringe ourselves on anybody else, but everything that is done is for our people. Let the people look after themselves elsewhere. So he saw all of that. Governments forming, and the leadership of our Inuvialuit people. When this governance from the outside come, all the leaders in these different camps that looked after 4 or 5 families, and the leader usually had a boat there, and they traveled and they stayed together to trap and hunt. But they always had a leader, and that leader always made sure he looked after his group. Okay, these were there in place. Then when the government started setting up Inuvik, both governments came in, territorial government, federal government. Okay, their government, they didn't even know nothing about Inuvialuit governance, leadership. And they didn't recognize those leaders that were real leaders to look after people. And they had to handle after their people, even after all of those sickness and diseases that dropped our population, to a very remnant, Inuvialuit called it. He said, these first Hablana, when they first come, explorers, our people numbered probably in about over 8,000 according to our history. And you're going to lose many, maybe, many members. And they're going to die without these Hablana touching you, killing you with guns, knives. Just their presence there is going to kill you. And so you have this smallpox disease that wiped out a lot of our people. And then not soon after, when the fur traders come and they start making a census as to, because they're saying, they want to keep attracting those people bringing their fur, they got their own journals. They keep track of, this one bringing in the fur, and then they keep track of all of his sons and the people under him. And so his interest is not only the one bringing in, but all these other potential, people that is going to generate revenue out of. So they had kept pretty good records, those early fur traders, for their own interest. And when they came in and they started looking at the numbers of the actual Inuvialuit that were left that they were dealing with now, they said the numbers were about 2,500 Inuvialuit left from those thousands. And now, from the time that the whalers, when other white people with a different interest come, especially with the whalers, bringing more diseases, more people gonna die. And it came to the point where the Northwest Mountain Police got pretty concerned. If these all got all exterminated, what's gonna happen with, the indigenous people? We can't bring people from the south and expect them to live in this environment. They'll never survive without the help of these native people. Like when they came in, they used guides and interpreters. Anyway, the RCMP decided to make a census. Okay? So he got the permission to make that first census before 1920 to see exactly how many Inuvialuit were alive. And there was 3 numbers that were brought out with their you might say, research. One of them was that they counted themselves, RCMP, as a government agency. They had a number, which was 250 left. The fur traders, with their records, had about 500. And then they had another one with a consensus of population, and that was the missionaries, Anglican and Roman Catholic. You when you belong to a religious institution, they write every name down of the people that they spiritually feel they're responsible for. So you had, you see, 250, 500, and then you have 750. And so from the 8,000 people, it dropped down there to, like the RCMP said, 250 Inuvialuit left. Inuvialuit saw that. He says Inuvialuit is going to be a remnant. The original people from our descendants, a remnant is going to be left. But that remnant is going to be there. And they're going to go through a lot of these impacts. And he saw all of that. And so I ended there with history, okay? For a while about the Inuvialuit. But
Let me just change batteries. It's a good time to switch.
just wait till I catch my breath here.
Sure.
Because I just finished eating.
Yeah. You got along with a lot of elders when you were younger?
They call me, my 8th generation called me little old man.
You were like old soul.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with elders, even as adolescent.
Yeah.
So I spent, all kids are playing around my age after doing my little thing for a while with them. My mind switched to my interests, which were the elders.
Yeah.
They had so many stories about their life. And I know them. I could see them in my mind. I know how their characters, the way they move, the way they speak, seriousness of issues. Yeah.
For me, I'm curious if someone might have recorded some of those. When you were a kid, did you ever see Edward Lenny come into the Delta with that recorder from CBC?
Not him.
Okay.
I've, like I say, I isolated myself,
Yeah.
But my dad had contact with me.
Okay.
But I know when I got warmed up to cope, the ones that I converse with quite, every time I see them was Victor Allen and Peter Sasher.
Okay.
Because they were the ones doing the land use and occupancy study and the mapping of all of the land use and occupancy studies, like they were doing the information gathering, and that's the ones I took part in. Like all of the white consultants that were, doing the land use occupancy study, well, they just gave them the maps and stuff and told them to go out and get the information. Like Peter Usher, I never really met him because he was part of the, and there were some other ones, but I never did talk to them because I didn't associate myself with those guys. I prefer associating myself with our people because I was more comfortable and I don't have to explain myself to them. Anyway.
Victor would have known a lot about Yukon and Old Crow, that area too, huh? He would have traveled over that way quite a bit?
Who?
Victor Allen.
Well, Victor Allen, I don't know how much he traveled, but I know he was the kind of guy that knew about the land and the wildlife and, all aspects of Inuvialuit living, Nunatarmilk, like he was. And I never followed him that much, but I knew him enough, for elders like him to have a kind of respect for me, saying you're my equal, and I was certainly not their equal, but they treat me, to an extent that, I was one of them. No different. Just like I say to other people of my other generation, I don't care how much I know and I got in my mind and I can talk, I'm still a simple man, simple harvester, least of all the sustenance harvesters that I know, but I'm one of them. That's my perceptive on that.
Okay. Let's see the card here. Have you ready, Boogie?
Okay, from where I left off, I think, I gave you, the information was sort of like the vision that he saw all of the Hablana, different interest groups coming in. And Isaluk said they're going to come like waves, like Malik in the ocean, one wave following another, and this is how he described these people coming into our area. First the explorers and all of this, the ones I mentioned, wave after wave. And every time it hits our people, just like the shoreline, certain things get eroded, there's movement around, and things change. And he said, the counsel he gave, which was very important to our people, was these changes are going to come, we have no control over it. And he said when he saw people dying with the smallpox, at that time he didn't know what kind of disease it was. People were helpless. I'm not good workers of medicine from the land. They had Inuvialuit doctors. They had nobody could help. And he said, some of you might want to stop these Qablana from coming, kill them all. But he said, in the future they're going to be here. So what you have to do now is not go against them. Learn about them. What made them start their walk in our region in the first place? Walk beside them. Follow their footsteps. Eventually you're going to be walking beside them, and it's just far in the future you're going to be leading them. So this is the counsel he gave, not to fight. And he said his name is Isaluk. Isaluk means to swallow whole. It's like a seagull when he sees the fish available, goes down, other seagulls are going after the same fish, but he gets there first and he just swallows it. And he has control over it. Nobody could take it away. He said, we have to swallow those white people with their different interests. Don't try to fight them, break them apart, eat piecemeal, swallow it whole. That was his name. He says, when you do that, swallow whole, he says, he's watched seagulls doing that, and they're really discomforted. They can't even fly sometimes because the fish they swallow is so heavy. So there's a lot of discomfort, but they swallowed it. And after all that discomfort and digestion going on, belly aching and discomfort, when that food gets digested, that gives them a lot of energy and if he keeps swallowing, he becomes the biggest amongst all of the other flocks of seagulls. He said, Inuvialuit, if they want to become the strongest people in the future, to swallow the ways of these Habluna, don't break them apart, learn, work with them, alongside of them, and then eventually you're going to lead. And so he was counseling them not to fight. And there was a lot of people that wanted to uprise, but there were elders to keep young people calm because young people get angry. And so there was a lot of counseling and advising and given to young people, and especially when the remnant was left. He saw it, and he told the people if that remnant arrives to that point where they physically see so few people are left, or people, he said, listen to the elders, they're going to give you advice. And when that happened, the elders told the young couples that were together yet, they told them to raise as many children as they can. I mean, don't just stop at 4 or 5. Keep on going, even if though, just keep on going. And some of those women, they had 16 to 20 children born, babies. 3, 4, 5 survived out of a large number. And that's what he was seeing, and he was counseling them to have large families. And they were, and a point in time came in the mid-20s, 30s, 40s, where help started coming in the form of health services when a climate became, settlement, and the hospitals were formed by the two religious institutions in one community. And once help started coming in and medical services to some extent, by the late 30s, 40s, you started seeing more of the children born surviving. And this is why you see such big families, because these guys lived up to the counsel of the elders, and they had all these children, and with the help that they were getting, there was more of their children surviving than that were dying. So the remnant are the ones that are, that produce the population that we have today. And as far as the numbers go, we have reached almost like that 8,000 level. So Isalek saw all of that, and his counsel was, don't fight him, swallow it. And that's what we've been doing, our people from the past. My dad's generation and all the other people of his generation, they had grandfathers and mothers born in just after, in the early 1700s, that were alive, that they were able to get information from. So it just never ended with the information I'm giving about what I just spoke about went beyond those grandfathers of my parents and the parents of his generation. And that was ITK to them. And with their impacts that they had to deal with all these new stuff. So ITK was not only historical knowledge, but also as they were adapting to each wave, new TK was starting to form. And these are the ones that we call Inuvialuit, the ones just recently. That's when the white man came into the area. Inuvialuit is the ones that were just starting to adapt to what was going on. But anyway, Isaluk's vision was really the heart of the drive. Every time you saw wave after wave coming and you saw what he said is there, I mean, and they were living through it. You know, one could only imagine if the truthfulness of that vision and how they had to adapt, you know. They did their part, adapting. I mean, they're the first ones to start adapting to the white culture, Qablina. And they never forgot their history. They said, Isaluk said one other thing that's very important for me. When he told our people, he said, you know, when these governances come to our area from parts unknown because they were from out of the settlement region, he said, these guys won't recognize the leadership. And we saw that in the 50s, 60s. These people that were leaders in different large family groups in different parts of the settlement region, spending their winters trapping and hunting in all the different parts. When the communities got together, to us, they were still leaders. But the government never recognized those leaders. Because they were always so busy, they had no time to spend sit down like I am in front of this camera, right? They didn't have time to do that. They can't sit around, let opportunities, window frames of opportunity go by to do their harvesting. Seasons are very short. You don't waste days. And so in order for them to continue being leaders, they have to practice those survival means of timing, you know. And so Isaluk saw that happening. And he said, when the war of words start to continue to have our homeland, it's going to be a war of words with the Qablina, with their governance, and it's going to be in a language that's foreign, strange. The war of words is going to take part in a strange language, and our people never even knew about English or French. But he saw that. And he said, he even goes deeper, he said. These Qablina, with their words, they have another language, which is even more stranger than the English words, you know, that we're going to use for fighting. A war of words. And he was seeing the two things. One was, he said, the elders, which should be only advisors and counselors to the leaders. And since the present Inuvialuit leaders were not recognized by anybody, when they formed COBE as a board, they were not only elders, they were the leaders, combining the two. And he said it's going to happen. And so that's why the COBE board, especially on the Inuvialuit side, because you had the Inuvialuit, you had Inuvialuit, you had Inupiat from the Delta, but everything that Inuvialuit from historical side, we know about them because those are very That was our culture, our tradition, our customs. And the war of words was negotiating for a right for our homeland. And the whole purpose here was for Inuvialuit to get our homeland recognized with the foreign government. And that's why you see the IFA as it is. Very unique. There might be some compromises where we don't have total control over the ISR in regards to resource development. But I tell you, no resource development goes on until Inuvialuit have a say as to how it should be done. Throughout all the time when he saw the oil companies coming in, landscape changing. He saw night turn to day, you know. There was so much activity there. There was people just moving around on a continual basis, 24/7, 365 days of the year. Nighttime, wintertime, when it gets dark, even that darkness was lightened up so people could keep on working. So he saw all that. He saw pipelines. He called them tuglut. He said, look at your top of your hand. All those blood vessels going all over to your heart. He said there's going to be tuglut on top of the land that dig into the heart of the earth and draw the fluid out of the earth. It's going to be leaving the area. So, to us, this is not strange. People might say, well, there's a downturn in oil and gas activity, and they're saying, well, the petroleum products and stuff is going to be of the past. And that's okay with me. But if we shall side happening that we have actual pipelines, the fluid from the ground being pumped into those pipes and out of the area, parts unknown, still to happen. So the generations that are alive today, they got to be prepared for it. All those in the mid-60s, 70s, 80s that took part in oil and gas activity and they were making good revenue, well, since that time they're elders now. If the oil companies come back, these guys are not going to be hired with all that expertise that they gained. They won't hire them. So, that's the dilemma of the leadership that has to deal with the now and then. The leaders in the past, as today, they should deal with issues that are pressing issues today. In the next little while, by 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years. That's their responsibility, is to deal with those issues and make decisions. That's the leader's job. The elders' job here, with their long life experience, should become advisors and counselors. With a different expertise they got, if you're going to deal with the government, like for oil and gas, you should look for the elders that have been involved in that industry. They'll give you good advice as to, we started all over again. This is how it, in my point of view, after thinking about it all these years, this is how it should have been done. And I think you're going to get a lot more of a result of meaningfully taking part in the changing northern society and economy. That was one of the goals. Our people saw that and they wanted that as a goal. So it's going to be the leaders, present leaders' challenge to be able to do that. And myself, as I'm going to be 69 in May, I'm not interested in going into politics and being involved in this and that. I did my time. But I can certainly be advisor. And same as all of the other negotiators, they feel the same way. We don't want to take leadership. We want that leadership to begin again as in the past, with the guidance of the elders that have the expertise. If you want expertise of the environment, that's easy for us. A lot of us still know that. Wildlife behavior patterns, we know those. We teach them to our kids. You know, in my life personally, meeting with young people, these guys are, these kids, you know, that are about 18, 19, 20, 21, I've talked to them. And they got those same principles, and I never even talked to them. I don't, you know, their parents and their grandparents, they're the ones that talk to them. I didn't have to teach them. They already had it implanted in their hearts, that ITK. And that's amazing to me. You know, because just because I don't see them and know who they're talking to doesn't mean that they don't exist. It exists by them living their life and saying, you know, I don't like the way this hunting is going on right now, and they're going off in the wrong direction. They don't have no respect. And here, you know, they're doing all they could to be an example of having respect in their harvesting, usage of their harvest, and how they conduct themselves toward elders and their society around. These are special people, young people. Because like me, like all that social issues of society, like I said earlier, we were implanted them in our adolescent years. Before teenage, minds start coming along and you start seeing yourself in a new light. Our elders have always said, a lifespan consists of 3 or 4 stages. One of them is being born to adolescent, teenage years when they're seeing a new world in front of them, become young adults when they take their role in the responsibility and the part of being part of the society. That's their role. They're raising their kids. They're occupied with looking after their children, which is supposed to be. And they're fully engrossed in it. But the time comes when the children are on their own now. That's another life. You know, as an elder, you know, that kids grown up, you don't have to try to find food for 5, 6 of your children. They can look after themselves now. So what happens now? My children are gone, like a lot of us, you know, our children are gone, raising their own kids, and now what happens here? We got a lot of knowledge, and life goes on for us as becoming elders. So as in the past, the elders, the society becomes their family. That's their family now. Beyond their physical, biological family where they looked after them, now they want to look after the interest of, they adopt the society as a family. That's the perspective of the elders. That's my perspective as I grow older. That I don't, you know, my responsibility is being there for the Inuvialuit family. And a lot of the people that you saw in our meetings here, they have the same attitude. And the older we get, years getting cut short, the more concerned about what you leave behind with your children and with the society. Those are the deepest concerns. A lot of us are not scared to die. We know it's going to happen. But what bothers us the most is what we're actually leaving behind. Did we do all we could to help the society achieve what should have been achieved, you know? And with the adaptations, there's just that much more distractions. So that's the, but Inuvialuit City, we swallow it and take it into and get grasp of it. You know, we can change things around. People think it's hopeless now, because right now we're still living under the umbrella of being governed by legislations made from the Parliament of Canada. Because a lot of those legislations that are in that we have to live by haven't been conformed to the Inuvialuit mentality. Our governance haven't been recognized to a point where our governance, historical governance, and the legislations of the Parliament There are two governances, and this is where the government have a hard time in understanding Aboriginal self-government, Indigenous self-government. They didn't know nothing about. They thought they were the only governance in the whole of Canada. They didn't even consider that native people had their own government. The Indians all over, tribes all over, and ourselves, the Inuit, they in Quebec, Labrador, NWT, they had their governance. And so, and the whole idea behind conforming those legislations is having these two governing bodies get together and saying, this is their position, this is ours, okay? Let's compare the two. And let's see how you can work together to take care of your own people in your own region. What we want to accomplish in the self-government is not to try to solve the problem of all of the government social problems across Canada. Even the neighbors, the Indians, and the Inuit Central Arctic to the east of us. They had their governance. Let them have theirs. They know what to do because their customs are different than ours. We're not going to force our governance outside of our settlement region. Inuvialuit governance should be within our region. And if the other people benefit, like a lot of people benefited from Inuvialuit being the first settlement of land rights in the NWT, were the first group out of the chutes when they formed, even before Diane formed the land claim departments. We were long ready before them. They had to catch up. With the self-government they were talking about now, the government still has to catch up after all these talks. Because, like this, because native people like ourselves, we're not college trained, we're not university trained. They think that we don't know nothing about life and social life. But my rebuttal to that is, the government uses academics, technical people to put words, and this is other language that Inuvialuit, apart from the normal English language. You get these academics start talking in English in the way that they've been trained, you can't even understand their words, and yet they're English words. That's what he saw. He said there's words within those words, and only now, like with me and others, and Cope saw that board, that since the government relied on those technical words, IFA became a technical document put there by academics. So, but it's all, those academics, consultants that worked with us, they captured the spirit and will and the determination of what Inuvialuit history was talking about. Because, they were convinced, our resource team, that all of our governance in our historic past has been developed through practical experience, and those were hard lessons. Learning through practical experiences, very hard lessons. If you make the same mistake again as in the past, you're a poor judge of, You shouldn't be making the same mistakes again year after year. It should be once. Once you learn, then you adjust your governance and say, in dealing with that issue, this is our decision. All our decisions not based on hypothetical, trying to second guess somebody else like they do in the academics to try to deal with legislation. And even when they put the legislation on, people find ways to have loopholes through their legislations. When our people historically made a decision as to our governance, there were no loopholes. Nothing. Now you take a look at the European source of governance anywhere in the world now that follow the same democratic system. they have those loopholes, and they have to deal with them, and it causes more social problems because even in these social academics and psychiatrists and all of that, archaeologists and anthropologists, that are used to try to deal with, with the different ethnic groups. Well, if they never lived it, they will never understand it. You gotta live through it, and we did. And our governance is that strong. And I know we have to make compromises. We made that with the Inuvialuit Game Council in relation to the wildlife and environment of the ISR, both on land and offshore. We made a compromise that we will become co-managers with them. We will become co-managers of the environment and wildlife with the federal government. And because of it being a co-management type, we're helping the government in these resource development, any kind of social activity economically going on in the area. That we will put our thoughts into it, reduce the footprint if possible. Inuvialuit, even though we were against all of the environmental and economic and social impacts that was going on, the world companies and the governments, they took it as, oh, these native people, they're against the resource development. And they never stopped to ask our elders, never stopped to ask me, what my thoughts are, what my elders' thoughts were. And our elders, because of Inuvialuk's vision, they knew one person is going to have an opportunity to live their chosen life, a harvester or wage economy. Some of them are going to be in between, working and harvesting. And when you're working for the oil industry or some contractors, well, they need you all of the time, right? According to their contract. Harvesters don't have to worry about that. They're doing their own thing. And I think where that balance is, where the two cultures in one person comes in, is through being employed by government, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They could get into the wage economy, and then they're off work, after work, weekends, long holidays, they're doing their cultural thing. Okay, so there is that, and some of those people, that's why they just want to live from check to check with the government, check to check, because they're getting revenue, and at the same time they're getting their harvesting done, doing their land activity and being with their families. So that's a choice some of them make, and I think those people have more of a balance because they depend on both. Those that are working with the oil companies and any mega project contractors, well, they have a goal, nothing else should be getting in the way, they figure. And when the government and the oil industry were being fully active here impacting us, they thought we were against them. We were never against any development because Inuvialuk saw it coming. He told us to swallow it. What we were against was how they were going about it. We had no control. They did whatever they want, and things got even worse. And we really thought, that we're going to be no more unless we got that war of words settled. That's the land rights negotiations, and I think we achieved that. And there had to be a drive and a knowledge as to, just the situation you're in to get out of it. And it was all of a challenge, but I think with what's been negotiated so far, we've come this far, but I think we can go a lot further. Once the IFA is fully implemented, like fully implemented, then you're going to see the Inuvialuit strengths here in dealing with all the social issues. And if the government could only accept that, and we could convince them that, yes, we got knowledge about all these social things, let's make some compromises here, the same way we made some compromises in being co-managers and also adapting into the quota system that they had established. Research. I mean, we had to adapt to those. We compromised. We knew all about that. Well, a biologist and anthropologist and archaeologist. I didn't have to go to education down south to understand all of the Inuvialuit knowledge in regarding to wildlife biology, in regard to historical aspect of our people. I didn't have to go to college to learn that. We lived it. Okay, so I mean, to me, is the strength of a people that know where they come from, and they know for a short span of time, in our lifetime, we can contribute. And I think this is where, people like myself and those negotiators that are remaining and those field workers that we saw in the last workshop we had there in regarding to 101 IFA, well, it was just a short thing. But I saw in them, like in me, we got unfinished business. IFA is not, we don't have the IFA. We got some of it implemented, but we don't have the IFA. So while we're alive and being able to be still part of it, not as leaders, but as advisors and counselors, that we can direct our leaders to say, go and achieve this. And I'm not talking about hiring consultants from the south to come here and work and try to put something together for us. I'm saying, give us a chance to put our position in. This is our position regarding to health and service. This is our position regarding to housing. This is our position regarding to social service and welfare. And based on all historical knowledge, ITK, environment, in dealing with economic development now, even with adaptations that we've had, and social development, because you're dealing with all kind of people now. And so this is the way we want to handle it. Make our position known. And they got their legislations, and let's see where, okay, let's start negotiating now. You got your position, we got ours. In the IFA, we did that. And we focused on the land rights of our claim. We never tried to claim no land, just land belonged to us. That's why we're saying, we're not seeking a claim to the land. This land is ours. We've got land rights there. Okay, you want to take some of our land? Well, we can compromise. So that's why you have Inuvialuit land and Crown land. And with that came financial compensation for the lands we gave up. So that became a very comprehensive claim. And now this was just dealing with the land. Now we're dealing with the offshore. Okay, so we're saying, okay, any legislations that the government is dealing with right now, this is our position. Let's find a balance as to what goes on out there. We just don't want to see the government going out there and say, oh, we opened this area for oil and gas development. Put your bid in, saying to the oil companies. Even before they do that, we want to be involved in saying, okay, we'll open some land, but not the way you're going to be opening it. I think there should be some reservations here. And then we'll give them our arguments. So, I mean, this is, again, is wanting, that's why the IFA says, government legislations up to that point, and even in the future with new legislations, they got to come to us and deal with us. In the past, let those legislations of government conform to the IFA. And when they say conform to the IFA, in our negotiations, it was conforming to Inuvialuit governance. That's what it boiled down to. Not the IFA as a one snapshot of Inuvialuit final agreement. And everybody looks at that and they think that IFA is a person. IFA, the word IFA is not a person. The people are. Anyway, I think that's about enough for...
Sure. Is there any specifics that you want to go into? Any unfinished business? Anything specific you'd like to see changed? You personally?
While I'm there?
Yeah.
I think I just did with legislation, fully implementing the IFA. I think I did that, and I really feel I expressed that. As a matter of interest, what was in your mind when you asked me that? What else? Because I thought I said it, and it didn't seem like it connected.
Maybe there's something about watersheds. There's something about areas that you harvest from that you would like to see rules changed more specifically than the way they are.
In regards to harvesting?
Yeah.
Okay, I can say that. You know, the only legislation in our IFA that we have agreed to is through the Game Council, which was showcased, and we proved we could do it, where we conformed the Wildlife Act, not the act itself, but the regulations, to adapt to what we as Inuvialuit should be legislation regarding wildlife in our area. And the government really didn't like that because we had equal authority without even having self-government. I mean, they thought that they still could continue on like their old legislation. We're saying no. IGC is set up to change and conform those legislations. And it took some time, and we got the first draft of conforming the regulations and policies in regarding to the Inuvailuit settlement region. We conformed them to that. And we had to adapt into all of those, like I say, quota system. They were already in place and they got grandfathered in. So that's the compromise we made. We didn't like it, but in order to get the settlement, that's the compromise. And we made it pretty clear to them. We could compromise more than you will ever know just by adapting to those quota systems that you got set up. But we'd like to make a change here. And the way we did it with those quota systems is that we have exclusive rights to them. But we have exclusive rights to those quoted animals. Government can't come in and say, well, you got to use this part of this quota for this and that. No, we have exclusive right. And those are the kind of rights, even though we've compromised some, and we're saying, okay, we're going to tighten up a little bit on everybody else. This is in our control. And we can give those quoted animals to use solely as an Inuvialuit. Or if there's another way of making revenue to make it bigger, like big game hunting, to make our revenue coming in a lot bigger form, we got the right to be able to say, okay, we'll accept different hunters that will pay these big bucks. If I want to hunt polar bear, at that time, the most I would get for a good-sized bear is $2,500, right? As a harvester. And I could make use of that. And it was good money to make use of that. You take a sports hunter out now, as I did, through big game guiding. And I started going out to those trade shows. I'm not going to express how much I make here. We're harvesters, we're outfitters, and I don't think I should blabber off what my price is for those hunts. But it's all based on the knowledge that I produce. It's all based on the way I handle my clients. It's all based on how respectful I am towards them, and be respectful for the law of wildlife acts and that, because, they try to take command because they think that they're the captain of the ship because they're giving all this money. And I says, you won't last very long as the captain of the ship here. Without my advice, you're probably going to die in the first, second, third day. I'm here to keep you alive. I'm the captain. I make all the decisions. And I want you, if you want to go back home alive, you listen to me. If you want your family's worried about you and they want me to make sure you get home, my responsibility is make sure you're here to enjoy your hunt, but also to get you safely back to your home. That's business, So, and being personally over there, I don't have to deal with somebody booking the hunts for me. I can be very selective after we've developed to the stage where we're actually going down there to book our own hunts. So, again, wildlife, all these kind of things. If a person knows about his abilities, like I did and other ones, we can let the natural resources go a lot further than just getting it for $2,500. And that goes with every species of fish, whales, whatever. And the only blockage that we have right now to developing resource development of renewable resources is the Fisheries and Oceans Act and legislations. Those got to conform to the IFA. And right now you hear about people, like we heard, single mothers and elders, that they want food, native food, they're barely getting it. The whole purpose of the claim was to make sure that the nutritional needs of our people in the ISR, that we meet that need. And if we can start harvesting them like we did in the past with knowledgeable people and in an orderly fashion, and with the guidelines that our own people set. And we don't have to wait for the government to say, okay, you guys could do it now. Like, for instance, right now, we stood the government in environment, in wildlife and environment. What they're saying to us is, okay, Inuvialuit and Aboriginal people across Canada, if you could scientifically prove to us that you're doing it in a conservative and sustainability level, if you could prove that, they want us to put on the hat of an academic and a technical person and give them an answer. We can't do that. But we can say, look, take a look at our history, take a look at our lives, take a look at how we've managed to, until you guys came along and you started impacting all this. Okay? We had sustainability. We had conservation measures. So I think those are the kind of, just on the wildlife and environmental side, those are the kind of things that have to be conformed to the IFA.
Change topic, let's talk about IDC. What happened between 74 and 85? Were those the years? Your 9 years you were in charge?
What's that?
IDC. The early days of IDC.
You want to switch to IDC? Is that good enough?
If you got to, you want to take a
Could
break?
I go for smoke first?
Go for it.
Look, yeah, what else?
Let it roll.
Okay, in regards to taking a look at how far we've come since 1984, June 5, when we got the final agreement signed. And that final agreement was based on implementing the IFA. Yes, we got all the corporate levels established, but a lot of the other things that should have been negotiated, we still got to conform the legislations, we still got to form the self-government. 35 years later, we don't have them yet. And in order for us to, maybe not for me to benefit, but for the generations after me, that are land people, to benefit, and also those that are wanting to become technically trained to be taking meaningful parts in the workforce. And we got to adapt to the present situations. There's been a downturn of economy. Okay, let's find ways to develop those resources. Let's find ways to focus now on the land and the people that use the land. So we don't hear any more of single mothers, elders wishing for a certain type of food. And they get it sporadically, and I don't think they should be giving it sporadically. Those people I'm talking about are like me. I could eat at home if I was home, like I've been for many years. My food basically comes from the land. I will eat Western food maybe 2-3 times a month. Store-bought steaks and bag ribs once in a while. I don't like chicken. I don't eat hamburgers. So there's many more people like me, and they're not getting access to what I have access to, because I'm living that life. And these people should be given a chance to, they're remaining, live out their lives with at least satisfaction of still getting from the land their nutritional requirement to keep them healthy and to keep their minds saying, okay, we got control now, I can die a happy person. And I think this is why I really stress that we have to finalize the implementation of the IFA. And once that happens, then you're going to see the Inuvialuit in their true form. And we have on site now the Inupiat that immigrated in 1920, Nunatakmiut that lived here, that lived in the Delta, Inuvialuit that lived in the coast, Inuvialuit that live in the Central Arctic of home now. We're all one now. We're no different from one from the other. We're jointly doing this now. And I know from historical point of view, the Inuvialuit are like the Inuvialuit. Their history goes back to millennia, just like ours. Their customs, their traditions were different. Culture is the same, basically, but traditions and customs are different. But yet we accept each other now. We're one. And even though there might be Inuvialuit, Nunatakmiut, and Inupiat now, we're all Inuvialuit. That wasn't the final agreement. We never spelled out that there's different ethnic groups. But we're all living under the same ISR, depending on the resources that we have available to us. And I think that we can make use of all those resources that are there to a greater extent if we have that IFA implemented, fully implemented. And it's going to take some hard work, a lot of thinking on the part of the new generation. But I and the ones that we're meeting with about 101 IFA just recently, they've all expressed that we got unfinished business. And I'd like to see that unfinished business gets done, so we could all pass away as happy, contented people. And I think that while we're alive, I think we still can do that. The problem that I see right now, yes, we got a lot of leadership now, and percentage of them are really good because they have a good heart and trying to do the best they could, and they got too much special interest groups trying to put their thoughts into the decisions making they have to make. But I think we have to put down and saying, as historically, this is Inuvialuit decision now. You follow it. And there are consequences if you don't. Denial of certain rights. Like, for instance, in the HTCs right now, if one of our members is disregarding the decisions and the bylaws, we have the authority to cut them off on certain species that they hunt because of the way they do it. And we're getting more of a determination now in enforcing that. Not related to social issues, but related to the image of Inuvialuit, where you make all kind of rules and policies, guidelines, and they break it, our members break it, and no consequences follow their actions. And I think, especially where I come from, regarding caribou, they want to put their foot down. Well, we got that option, and they said they're willing to exercise that right of our bylaws. And each HTC has those. And you don't have to be taken away for life. I don't think those rights should be taken away for life. But they should be taken away until they have time to think about it and come and continue on their life. Because we shouldn't deprive them of that if they're willing to change their ways. The other problem that I see is that there are a lot of people in boards and IRC, Game Council, that make decisions that harvesters have to live by. And the information, even before they make the decision, hasn't come down to the grassroots level of harvesters. And we only find out about it when it becomes law, according to how agreement they have between the Game Council, Ministry of Responsible, whether it's federal or territorial. The information is not coming back to us before they even make those decisions to make us live the way we, according to their decision. It seems like to me that, like, I've been involved all my life with wildlife, negotiating the claim, and being involved with other aspects of the IFA. And because I'm not an elected member into any boards, because I made that choice. If I was elected into different boards, it'd be everything would snowball on me. Because I've got some information, I know what I want to target, I know how to get it. But if I do that, it means more of my time. I won't own myself. I got leaders to do that for us. I don't have to do it. But that information is not coming to us, and they're not listening to us. Yes, they have public meetings, but you have all Tom, Dick, and Harris coming into these public meetings, and they just mouse off wherever their mind takes them. But in a case of decisions made for the best interest of the Inuvialuit as a whole, it has to come from the heart. What are we willing as Inuvialuit to live with, regardless of so many other voices? That's the leadership's decision. Myself as becoming an elder and other elders that we saw today, they're never consulted the same way, as me. They were not consulted to give advice, to give direction, to use them like arrows to shoot at a target, to achieve something, to get results. It's no use to shoot an arrow and miss the target and get nothing. I think as elders, regardless of the kind of social issues that we're targeting, if the guy that has the bow could shoot that one arrow from out of so many Inuvialuit involved, one or two people hit that target, they're the ones that's connected to the target now. They're the ones we use to benefit for the Inuvialuit of what was targeted and was brought down. It's like butchering, byproducts taken out of it. Well, not every Inuvialuit has to be involved in that. It has to be with the ones that we use to target these things and connect the arrow to them. They're the ones to deal with it. And there are a lot of issues, lots of targets out there that needs to be done, needs to be hit so we can be able to benefit from it. And it's not happening because our leaders need that guidance. We had that in the past. And all of these cultures, ethnic groups I mentioned that make up the Inuvialuit, they have the same desire to accomplish that. And as each year goes by away from us, the more concerned we get when we haven't yet accomplished what should have been accomplished through the IFA. So I think there's got to be a reevaluation as to how about making the most informed decisions for our people. We can't totally rely on the academics and technical people. That we got to get those technical people, academic people. We need them to break ground for us. The same way that we used the technical and academic resources. We imparted them our ITK. And they had a lot of questions regarding, but regarding to ITK, but they grasped the meaning of why we need to get the worded in the IFA the way we have it worded. Because those resource people had an insight to Inuvialuit heart, not head, heart. And they went for it. And they had to deal with all of their academic and technical people. But they're trained to do that. That's their training. But they were, with our consultants as scope, by the time that we have the agreement in principle on the IFA, these consultants were saying, not you guys have to do this, you guys have to do that. They had a heart. They were saying, we have to do this, we have to do that. And together, we put these two knowledges together and we achieved that. Now, with the implementing the rest of the IFA to conform all these legislations. We need those technical people. But these technical people, academic people, has to learn what's in the heart of the Inuvialuit in regard to those issues. Because there certainly has to be changing of legislation for our Inuvialuit settlement region to suit the will, the determination of the Inuvialuit. And I can't see that right now happening at the moment, but it should be happening. And get our Inuvialuit aggressively going after these things, because whatever that we accomplish, it's going to be final once we change those legislations. And those legislations, and it's going to be, we're not trying to solve, I don't think, the world's problems. We're trying to solve the problems we have here in our Inuvialuit settlement region with the present legislations. I know the government don't like to hear that, but that's them. And we don't have to try to conform ourselves to their legislations. I think there's got to be a compromise between the two. And we can accomplish that still. And our leaders right now that are leading and taking part in decision making, 20 years down the road, they're going to become the elders, and they're going to become in the same state as we are right now with elders that have gathered together, the remaining field IFA worker, negotiators, and the senior people that were with COBE right from the beginning. We're still alive. And if you could grasp what it took for us to get this far, and if we, while we're alive, get that IFA implemented, and aggressively, because we're recognized people now. We don't have to fight our way to the king of the hill. We're there. We're treated as equals across Canada. Well, let's let government live up to that. They wanted us to become equal and meaningful participants in changing northern side in Canada. Well, let's show them that we're capable of doing that. And we have proved that through, from 1977 to the 1984, that Inuvialuit are capable of and responsible. And we've proved that in showcase of IDC and the Game Council. And I think we can do that with all aspects of the legislations that the government have. We can show them that we are ready. And one other thing I'd like to mention before I stop talking on this is that for the education and for our people to become taking a meaningful part in the workforce of all areas, of all interests, both government, oil companies, and whatever that's businesses that are being set up. You had to get a certain level of education before you get your technical training, and a lot of them didn't qualify. And as IDC, we were the first ones to set up the Inuvialuit Education Foundation. After looking at the demographics of, as IDC president, and knowing what lies ahead with what training I got, the possibilities, these kids that were coming out of high school, their average level was 55, 60, 65. And at that level, can't be accepted into colleges, universities. When I look at the demographics of all these sitting at home, grade 12, doing nothing. Well, we decided let's take the bull by the horns, let's put up some money, IDC, an IP Inuvialuit Regional Corporation. Let's put money aside and get these kids upgraded, these young people. They're not kids anymore. Some of them were just coming out of high school. Some of them were already in the workforce. 30 years old, 25 years old. And they couldn't go into colleges and universities, even though they got all this practical experience already. They couldn't climb up that ladder because they couldn't in employment. Because they didn't have that academic training that was required. But they had the practical, and they could do the work. They proved it. All they had to do was get that academic training so they could get beyond one hurdle, another hurdle, and another hurdle. And they can go as far as they want from there. So we got money aside and we upgraded those people that were willing to work with us. We got their marks up. And we opened doors for them in colleges and universities. And we got them in there. The government, certainly, we used every opportunity to use government funding that was available to them to take that secondary training. And because these people were already grown up, had years of experience in the workforce, they had families. We sent them down that first year after they got enough upgrading and got accepted. That first year we lost about 40% that started in the academic training. Not because of their marks being poor. They kept up with all of those training instructions and professors, instructors and professors. But because they had family at home in ISR, and they're in the South for 6-8 months, and becomes very lonely, and they start reevaluating, themselves. They're missing out on weekend hunts. They're missing out on native food. They got no family with them. So as IGC and Inuvialuit Regional Corporation, we provided that fund. This was not government money. It's Inuvialuit money through IPC and IDC. We brought their families to them so they could at least have that connection with their families, and they would be together. And it was successful. We went into the high school level, and we started tutoring programs, and it was successful. Kids were starting to come out of high school and going right into technical training, colleges, universities, on a trade of their interest, right from high school. And those are all retired now. I mean, they got their certificates, and they worked in a trade. It's just that they never worked for IDC. They never worked for. As they came out of the technical training, government took them. Oil companies took them. Because of the payment that we felt they should be getting, these guys who were offering them more money than we could. Because our finances were limited, not like the oil companies, not like the government. And we couldn't compete with that wage level. And so you take a look at the demographics of Inuvialuit today. We have retired people that was in that program. And I think we should harness them. Get them to put in a few years in Inuvialuit organizations. Let them take control. Because these guys got training at management level even. And I think we should harness them for a few years. Recruit them. They got expertise. And for the contribution that Inuvialuit made through their education program and to get their certificates, I think we get a percentage of them willing to do that. And I think we should take that opportunity to take a look at, to see what kind of people and expertise we have around us and harness those energy and the will. And you know that Inuvialuit Education Foundation, when it was controlled by IDC and IPC, when we controlled it, it worked well. And then when IRC got implemented fully, and this was a social issue, and we handed the IEF to IRC. And once IRC got a hold of it, they had the same principles as us. And then all of a sudden, they got the community education societies, committees, and working with them. And the IEF for education got to the point where it was not functioning to the extent that we had it when we had Inuvialuit had total control. Government never had control. Government-related organizations, committees never had control. IRC, to me, gave up some of that control because they said we got to conform and live under the government system. And it got watered down. And I think we got to take another hard look at, those families that are sending their kids faithfully to school and getting them through the high school level. I think, a focus should be focused on them so that we don't have to bring people that already have children down like we did in the beginning. It took about 4 years, and then we didn't have to do that anymore because the ones that were going out south had no families. They were still young people. And we even had tutors for them if they required it. Wherever university, college they went to. If they needed tutors, we provided that. If they needed social support, we provided that. And we had a means of sending food to them so they could at least eat native food 2-3 times a week if they wanted. I think these are the kind of support system that we should have for those that we want to train to be technical people, academic people. That's it, it's been proven it could work. I know it could work. But there's got to be a decision by the leaders to make that choice. And that's what I mean about decision making. We can counsel. We can say, you approach it this way, but it's your decision. And that's the shortfall I got is people, and the people that were taking part in this IFA 101, we all felt together that this is missing, the council, and just being impartial of trying to support one family over another. We're not interested in supporting one person or a family. We're interested in all Inuvialuit being all equal, evenly, and given the chance to raise their children and take pride in the direction their children are going, whether it's in a wage economy or as harvesters, because we need both. In order to be Inuvialuit, we have to have that land use and occupancy. That's the first and foremost importance of having that land use and occupancy the way we had it in the past. And it's still being done right now. But the hunters, elders that are specialized in their region with the resources, renewable resources that they grew up with, they know the potential that's there. They might not be the ones harvesting, but they certainly know what's there. And they know how much has been harvested year after year from there, not only in their their lifetime, but in the lifetime of other people before them. So I just like to mention that the decision makers, to me, are almost like you got to be elected, and if you're elected, it's even harder to get elected because they're going in there through the democratic system of elections, which is totally different from the consensus leadership our people historically had. And we had to use that democratic system. And I think that's part of the shortfall. Even though how much we negotiated to have that consensus board membership in this really high-stake level, the government told us they won't recognize anybody that's not democratically elected, like in the parliamentary procedures. Yeah, we can learn all about the parliamentary procedures. We can work under that, but we want to appoint our members for Inuvialuit interests, Inuvialuit controlled interests. But they wouldn't accept that. And so, as negotiators, we thought, okay, to get the final agreement, we'll agree with that. But we all, even the co-elders that have passed away, I know they said, okay, well, we'll get the final agreement and we'll make an assessment after it's worked for a while. If it's not working, well, we're going to have to retable with the federal government the appointments to those boards. And if Inuvialuit got control of that, they got to live with decisions of the Inuvialuit now. We proved we can do it. And I think I'd like to leave it at that, where it's a challenge and it can still be done. And like I say, the biggest part for me is take a look at the demographics of all of the professional people we have that are still working, that have retired, and say, how can we make use of those energies while they still have the energy to to perform a duty for the Inuvialuit. And I'd just like to leave that portion where, and I think and this is part of what I see lacking in the way things are running in regards to the structure, political structure of our organizations. I think there's got to be a real assessment to see and adapt. There's got to be a change of heart in a lot of individuals. But the elders are there to say, okay, I know you want to help your family and get your people in there. But we're saying it doesn't always work. Because you're related, you get them in there. But we want the best people to be running the corporate structures. And I think this is why you're going to start seeing more focused attention given to all the Inuvialuit equally and as a whole. I see that in our future. I never had a vision, but I can see what Inuvialuit was trying to do. Based on the knowledge I have about the historical events that we have to deal with, the remnant, we're not a remnant anymore. Our numbers are way up in the 7,000-8,000 level of Inuvialuit now. Not 2,500, not 1,000. And we've got a lot of people now to look after. And we should give them that opportunity of getting the IFA implemented, because a few years ago, the General Auditor of Canada reported to the Parliament of Canada, you have to implement the IFA. It's not implemented. I heard that about 5 years ago. And still, we're living under the regime of Parliament of Canada and their legislations. I'd like to just leave it for you to, anybody, any value that are hearing this, to think about that. Give it deep thought. Those of you that had experience as a harvester, as a person with a certificate, give it some hard thought. And if you see elders like me in the street 10 years from now, and I'm still alive, you come to me and tell me what evaluation you make, and how it can work for the best. And if Inuvialuit leaders won't listen to you, well, there'll be other Inuvialuit elders that will take our place. Talk to them. And they'll give that advice. It'll make it publicly heard at the corporate level. So I think that's a really important part. We're in a different stage right now. We have professional people. We've got people with good hearts and leadership. And let's see what we could do from here. Hey, Ma. Okay, let's go to IDC. I think I shut off my...
It's 3:30.
Yeah, I gave my phone to my girlfriend. 3:30?
Yeah.
Okay, let's start it.
This does not be long, but just tell
Huh?
us about the IDC days. Yeah.
Okay, let's go for... What's the time?
3:30.
3:30?
Yeah.
Why don't we go for half an hour?
Okay.
Give me one more break, okay?
Yeah.
So I start talking now. I'll formulate a little bit more.
Yeah.
In all of my mind, I'll consolidate it
Yeah.
out there while I smoke.
Sounds good.
Okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Question first.
So, well, I'll read you what Peggy had initially said. Let's see here. They were just curious about, what were some of the things that happened, some of the businesses that were started. Let's see here.
Yeah. Why don't I start with my personal experience?
Yeah, 1977 to 1984, prior to IFA. Yeah.
Let me start with that, okay? Okay, how the other corporate body controlled by IRC is the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation. Well, I had the privilege of living another life apart from harvester. When Cope asked me to establish IDC, get it going, and they knew that I was back on the land trapping after the agreement in principle was signed, I walked away because I had lived up to my commitment with the Cope elders. And I walked away with a social conscience clear, satisfied for myself. And to my surprise, when IDC got set up with the same time as the Game Council, they were having trouble in finding and establishing IDC as to what was perceived, how it could go about. And being a negotiator and dealing with in all of the strategy sessions that the consultants who educated us, harvesters, about the potential in business and in economics of the settlement, we had crash courses, many of them. And we argued about and debated about a lot of those. To conform those to our mentality, Inuvialuit mentality, and the academics that we had, these all knew the legislations in regarding to business development, in regards to special interest groups at different levels. Government has legislations for everything. Transport Canada, uh, business development and how the government structures work with all the requirements for a workforce, and how the government handle possible business development at the national level and the territorial level. And they set aside fundings to help develop those businesses. And they even had businesses set aside, or money set aside, to support native businesses. Inuvialuit Eskimo Loan Fund. And other funds that were made available to Aboriginal and Indigenous people to be part of the economic development of their home, of the region. They had those. And then there was another side to this, economic side. And Inuvialuit were engulfed in this. And when the oil boom come on, there was no awareness made of all the possibilities of economic opportunities, business development. Both levels of government, federal and territorial, they never came to the Inuvialuit and says, okay, we would like to bring in a group of people here. We'd like to bring in the leadership of the Inuvialuit that are, like Cope Board and different ones that they used on the other committees that were set up. And there were many of them. Let's get them together and let's talk to them to prepare for this boom. We didn't know what was the potential that was there because the governments never provided that knowledge to us. And because it was an oil boom, you had all these business opportunists in any mega project, not only in the oil boom here, but also in other parts of Canada, where they had a mega project to stimulate the economy. They had impact funding. They made the people that are going to be impacted aware of the potential that's there. And it never happened with Inuvialuit here. It never happened with no Aboriginal group of people in the NWT. They never did that. And we see these business opportunities come in. Some of them came in by themselves and funded themselves and got involved. The little later comers, because there was a lot of spin-off benefits through business development, these opportunists, they made joint ventures. And these business opportunities, they're not here to live out their lives in their business here. They wanted to make a quick buck. These are hawks of prey, I call them. Financial hawks of prey. Opportunity that's there, they go for it. And even before I got involved with COPE, I saw this. I saw these opportunities. Go to an Inuvialuit and say, let's have a joint venture. Why do they want to have a joint venture? One of the reasons is Inuvialuit had no money to financially start something, to get business started. They had no business training. And these opportunities, they come and say, well, we can provide that. We can do the accounting. We'll handle all the business paperwork, get it going, work with economic development officers. Because they not only saw the opportunity here, they knew that if they get involved in a joint venture with the native people, the native people had access to all these monies that they qualified as Aboriginal people. Well, they tapped into that. They put up the money that was required as a start of business. They got the rest through the commitment that the governments made for economic stimuli of giving their portion. And a lot of it was sweat equity. Okay, the people were willing to work. They knew their job. They had the practical experience of providing a lot of those spin-off benefits. But they didn't know how to handle the books. They didn't know how to deal with the banks. Their partner did all of that. So they grew up very quickly with them just putting in some seed money to get the business set up and going, tapping into all these government programs, and through contracts, it just boom for them, for some of them. And then all of a sudden, after many years, and the company had assets and everything, and doing really well because the books were kept in order. All of a sudden, they had a family matter down south, and they got to go on this. They got to leave. And so what happens here is these people are smart people, and they know that you have buyout clauses between partners. You start up a business, and your partner wants to leave. For legal reasons, you have in your partnership agreement a buyout clause. And those buyout clauses can be used by both, either one or the other. And the Inuvialuit had the opportunity to buy out their partnership, get full control of the business. When it reached that level, these hawks of prey business people, they could tap into another government program. It's not a start of a business. It's another influx of money they can access where the native could use that money to buy out their partner. So they benefited from getting good management pay and from some increased the value of the business through assets. And so when they wanted to get bought out, it went to a pretty hefty amount of money. And now they get their buyout, they fly away, leave. Now you have an Inuvialuit that was doing the practical work. Now he's got to look after the business side, book side of it. Deal with getting contracts. Deal with the banks and saying, okay, I need some money here. The money's from my contract is going to come, in about 2 weeks. But I need the money right now to pay my employees. You go to the bank and you can get that interim financing. But the bank also knows that once that money comes in from the contract payment, that they get their money pretty well with interest as soon as that's done. And our people got overloaded, not only doing the practical work, but trying to do the office work. It didn't take long for the business to go down. There was started to be contract failures. Performances were not being met because the guy's trying to keep afloat. And pretty soon, the contract is over, and their contract is never renewed. And I saw this happening, and it really bothered me as a person. Not only me, but Cove Board. We've seen it, but we couldn't do nothing about it. So when we started negotiating the claim, like this is an education for us, a very costly, socially impacted education in regards to just the business side. And how could we turn that around? If we had monies to collectively, as an Inuvialuit, get some money to collectively and be involved in business as a corporate group of Inuvialuit. And so that was all discussed during our strategy session. How could we reach that point? And so when the agreement in principles, which was a forced one by the government, actions, where we almost brought them to court because they were not negotiating in good faith. And when we walked away from that intergovernmental meeting that we had to give all the government departments in one room an introduction, presentation of the Inuvialuit final agreement and right up to the agreement in principle. And we did our presentation. And we walked in there on the advice of the government negotiator, because it was supposed to be just a government departments meeting, and we're almost, not too long from now, we were going to get an agreement in principle, and it had to go through cabinet after it was ratified by the Inuvialuit. And we thought, okay, we have a chance now to address all these issues with different government departments. And all the government departments were there. They have that every, I think, quarterly meetings where the government departments, fisheries and oceans, energy, mine and resources, Diane, all of the government departments, they come together and they give their presentations as to, the monies they got to spend on this, and this is what they're doing. Well, we were given a chance to address these people. And so these are the people who are deputy ministers at very high level, deputy ministers on there, bureaucrats that do the work for their minister and to pass laws and legislation. And these guys are the ones that are advising their ministers if it goes to Parliament, to the Cabinet, and then to the Parliament of Canada. So we made our presentation to them. And this opportunity came about just when we were going to go home for a Christmas break. We won't negotiate again until after the New Year. And it was a good chance to introduce section by section the IFA. And each of us negotiators, like we knew the IFA in and out of it, all the clauses, sections, all the clauses, and how they interlink. So we had all of that knowledge of working with our resource people and technical people. And so in that presentation, we had no resource people with us. Just co-president, and he was one of the negotiators. And us negotiators, we got to the table, and there was a room full, auditorium full of seats, and there was a table up in a stage where you go in by the back door and you don't walk through the aisles of all these people. You come in by the door and you go straight to the table. And they made a slot for us, so many minutes, half an hour. And we can do our summary of what we wanted to achieve through the IFA. And the reasons why we had the IFA worded the way we did. Just to evaluate, negotiators going in there. And we made our presentation. Didn't take long because we were summarizing it. But these guys are academics, but they're They're smart people, you know. They can read a page in 30 seconds. When I read that same page, it takes me 5 minutes. That's how smart these academics are. Fast readers. And their memory is real phenomenal. Anyway, we made our presentation, and after it, our president got up from the chair. And Sam Ratty was blind, you know, but he was a very smart man. He was not always blind all his life. So he knew a lot of facts of life. And through Braille and everything, like, he kept up to speed as much as he could on things. And he was our president. And he was a harvester. He was a young man. He was a real aggressive guy, harvesting. So he had that knowledge. And when he got blind, he started dealing with expertise in the South to, you know, to help him along, counsel him and everything. And he became our president. And he got up and he said, "Is there any questions?" Just like he was looking at them, you know. "Are there any questions?" That whole room was silent. You could hear a pin drop if somebody dropped a pin at the end of the auditorium. How quiet it was. And it was sort of like amazing to us as negotiators. 10 seconds go by, very quiet. And I thought, and just like other members of my negotiators, I thought, boy, we made such a good presentation. These guys don't even have questions. And that's what I thought. But it was totally different with the government side. To me, I think they were in a shock. They wanted to say a lot of things. They wanted to ask a lot of questions. But they didn't know how to word their question. And we had a time slot. And it must have dragged on, that silence dragged on for a while. And we thought it was all over. All of a sudden, one of the members of a government department raised up his hand. "I got a question." And yes, silence. "What's your question?" And the government, I don't know which department it was, he said, "Why do you guys want the claim? Why do you need it? The government is looking after you. You get all your health services, your education, social services, you got all that. Why do you need a claim?" And regarding the financial compensation that you say you want to get and perform, you know, part of the claim in regards to money, the financial compensation, he said, if you guys got a hold of it, you native people, you're going to be drinking it, you're going to buy chocolates, you're going to buy chips, you're going to buy pop. You guys going to be drunk and you're just going to blow your money away. And after that, he said, why, you guys going to dig yourself so far down in a hole in the ground, that's going to be very hard for us to bring you back up. It's going to cost the government more money. And we just couldn't believe what we were hearing. Coming from the government. You know, and so, boy, we had enough. Sam Ratty was just going to say something to react to that. No signal, no nothing. We never even looked at each other as negotiators. All of us, like me, we got so mad we stood up with our president. And the president is blind and never even see us do that. But we all stood up with him. And Sam said, okay, you guys, you're not negotiating in good faith with us. See you in court. And as we walked out of the back door there was quietness in there. So on our way back to the hotel, we had a lot of thoughts. We had the money to start a court case. The monies that were advanced to us from the Inupiat of North Lobe Bureau, and we had it in the bank. Government didn't know nothing about that. And so, they must have thought, in order for us to take the government to court, we're going to be Inuvialuit like we approached them. Like, could we borrow money from your federal financial pocket? Let us borrow some of that and we'll use it to negotiate, and we'll give it back to you based on the IPA negotiation. Now, we can't go to the government and say, hey, we need this amount of millions of dollars so we could bring you to court. You know, the government wouldn't do that. They wouldn't provide the money. But the Inupiat, who had their agreement in 1970, in 1975, when we had the forming of the Inuvailuit, or the Inuit Circumpolar Conference Committee, we supported them in getting it established, and it got quickly established for each Northern Hemisphere country, which were present at the time for that meeting. And apart from that, we also went there not only for the such forming of the Inuit Circumpolar Committee, and after the meeting, we were also going to stay there to get a fact-finding from a working claim that's been working for 5 years. What were the good sides, what were the bad side of the claim. And so we spent a couple of days there because there was a pipeline going on right now. It's pumping oil to Anchorage, Alaska. And we went through that fact-finding mission. And before we left, the Inupiat said, okay, Cope, you helped us register the 13th region from the Delta and across Canada, which was part of the Alaska claim. And that 13th region was made up of all the Inupiat that had family and were living in Alaska and have moved to elsewhere outside of Alaska. And the Alaska claim was divided into 12 bureaus. Each ethnic person was called a bureau. And they got their claim with all these bureaus. Now, there was Inupiat families that had moved out of the state of Alaska and living and raising families in Canada, lower 48, or other parts of the world. The Alaska Native people, under the agreement in the Native claim, they negotiated the 13th region, which had no land ownership, but a lot of money was advanced or handed over to the 13th region, and they had to form their board and everything. But they needed to get people registered to run that 13th region from inside Alaska. And the money that they got has to be invested in Alaska. They can't take that money and invest it outside of Alaska. So the board, 13th region that were all registered as shareholders, they had to, through paper, get one of their board member appointed from their bureau. And they'll invest that money for them. So COPE helped them do that, register all the Inupiat in Canada. And a lot of them came from the Delta because the Alaska descendants, so a lot of them immigrated to Canada here and the families were growing. And so they said, okay, you helped us. Now I know they know how hard it is to move governments. And a lot of them don't want to negotiate in good faith. What we'd like to do is we'd like to advance you $1 million. We'll give it to you. You don't have to use it. Use it only if you're going to go to court. Let it earn interest in the bank. Easy access to you. Hire a law firm. Retain them. And so we walked away with a much surer assurance Yes, if the federal government not negotiating in good faith, we'll use that money to start it the Inupiat from North Slope Borough, Alaska, just next door to us, that borough here. They said, if you start it and the court starts, don't worry about extra money. We'll give it to you. Because we know if you got a case, you win, they know they're going to get their money back. But this is a start if you need it. And you know what? When we walked out of that intergovernmental meeting, we knew we had the money to bring the government to court. The government knew nothing about it. And so when, on our way back to the hotel, all of us were silent and deep thought. We couldn't even talk to each other. We were so mad. And finally, we got to the hotel. We were still quiet. As soon as we got to the hotel, our president phoned up our law firm, and he says, we're going to bring the government to court. And we're calling you to see what's the next step for us. So we're listening to our president, all in our deep thought. And the lawyer said, okay, we'll be there in half an hour. Because they must have had lawyers in Ottawa, because these were from Toronto. They must have had people in Ottawa, because they said, we'll be there in half an hour. And we said, okay. And now we had a half an hour to deal with. And one of our members said to Sam, Raddy, we were capable of answering any question, in our strategy session. We could answer anything that was thrown to us. And when this question come up, and your answer was, because, and he said, how come you just said because? And Sam Roddy again is stuck forwards because he thought we made a real good presentation. What else could he add? And long pause and with a drawl, and all he could say is, because. And that broke it. We all started laughing. And all that tension we had from the time we walked away to the hotel, finally the tension broke and we started joking around. We were back to our old self. And we told Sam Riley, you should have said this, you should have said that. But we all laughed about it. And just before the lawyers came in the door, the phone rang. It was the minister, Hugh Faulkner, Minister of Indian Affairs, tracking our president down and asking to go back to the negotiating table. That's when the lawyers walked in. And the lawyers, as soon as they came in, they said, what's going on? Two of them. And Sam said, just hang on. Our lawyers just arrived. Here, talk to our lawyer. And Hugh Faulkner, the lawyer was talking to Hugh Faulkner, the Minister of Indian Affairs, and he says, look, Mr. Minister, we're Cope's client, and they said they're going to bring the government to court. Now we just walked in. Let us phone you back. Hung up. It took less than half an hour from the time we walked away for the federal government through their legal channels, through probably ISIS, and they knew we had the money. And they got really scared too. Yes, we had the money to bring them to court. They really backed it. I don't know what kind of discipline that individual got from his department, but the government wanted to get us back to the negotiating table. And so these lawyers were like gunslingers. To me, they were dressed in black and real sharp. looking, this look, to me they look like Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp in a gunfight, ready for a gunfight. Really sharp looking lawyers, and so we presented Sam Ratty, gave him the rundown, and we were taking the options. So okay, we just heard the government want us back in the negotiations, and we're saying we're going to take them to court. And myself included, with some members, take the government to court. Get all what we can out of those damn guys. And so we argued about the good points and the bad points. And now we're going to try to get a evaluation of what the lawyers who were heard from us and the body language they were reading. And the lawyers said, look, you have your lawyer here during a negotiation to word the IFAs, and technically, it's our Aboriginal lawyer. Let's see what he says. Because they want to take the government to court, the law firm, they were willing to. Now, they're not our advisors because it's their interest to go to court. That's their end goal, is to take the government to court and make good money for them. And so, but they had the courtesy to say, look, you got your lawyer, let's hear from him. And our lawyer for Cope that we had with us in negotiations said, okay, there's two options here, he said. He said, you take the government to court, and it could be tied up forever through legal channels, through red tape. You might not even hear the case going to court for 20, 30 years. By the time all this is slowly going by, and that's what the red tape is all about. So you can reduce your arguments. The other option is you go back to the negotiating table and you get a final agreement. But if you go back to the negotiating table, we had two government negotiators that were red tape kind of people, all hypothetical all the time. We had problems with those guys, two of them. Get back to the negotiating table, tell the ministry you're going to get rid of those two and replace them with somebody else. And he said, the reason of this option is two things. One of them is, if you go to court and you won, government is forced to do this and that according to the judge, if you won. And if you got your claim based on the court decision, the rest of Canada won't look at us as equals. And he says, but if you negotiate and you get your agreement, the rest of Canada are going to know that, yes, these guys are part of Canada. They're not forced to deal with a native people. You had an agreement with them. The best option is to negotiate. So we made a decision, we'll go back to negotiating. So our lawyer phones up the government and says, okay, Sam Ratty says, okay, well, I'm going to let you talk to my lawyer. Gave it to the lawyer. And he says, okay, our client giving you a break, Mr. Minister. They're going to go back to negotiations, but they want this and this and this changed. Get rid of those guys, replace them, and speed up the ratification of the IFA. Because we have some really sticky points still to work out. And the minister was so glad to get back on. And I'll tell you that, just that threat prompted the government to say, wake them up. I mean, they must have been dozing off all this time. Woke them up, and all of a sudden, okay, the next session's just going to be, let's finalize it. Let's get it ready for ratification. And so, okay, let's do that. The government will replace those other two negotiators, and let's get down to business. And this is where it started. And we got the agreement in principle. But in my case, in regarding to, and after that, when we're negotiating and we're going to get to ratify it, we wanted to get IDC and the game IGC and IDC implemented. Now, there was a good chance to get these two. It's related to the land, it's related to the wildlife. And that's what we were negotiating, land rights, harvesting rights. That's the priority. Control of the environment and the land and the waters and offshore. And so we had our chance to do that. They were willing to do it, but they wanted to do it, implement IDC and IGC in the signing of the final agreement. And all these business opportunities in the oil boom, it was just like Inuvialuit all that time, from the time they reached Inuvialuit looking out their home and they're looking out their window and see all kind of activities going on, business development, a lot of activity. You want to get out there and be part of it, but you were stuck in your home. You had no money, you had no expertise, and you're just watching all these opportunities go by. And now with the agreement in principle, we had a chance to get outside the door and starting to be involved. And so we really wanted IGC and IDC to be implemented. And the government heed and hawed. And finally, we couldn't get them to move. They dug in their heels. So we switched strategy. We said, okay, look, the government, you're looking at us, harvesters. And in your mind, you're thinking, what kind of people we're going to be dealing with when they get the claim? All they saw was harvesters. And we told the government, okay, let's use this as a pilot project. Let's look at it as a pilot project. Get IDC going, and you're going to see the true character and nature of the Inuvialuit. And they heat and hot for a while, and we kept at them and said, yeah, it's not a bad idea. So we had an agreement in principle, signing. We had Inuvialuit Game Council and IDC going to be established. And this is where the IDC comes in. And being a negotiator, Cope, after about leaving them for about a year after signing the agreement in principle, they called me back on duty. They harnessed me again, put on a harness on me to develop IDC. And I can talk about IDC from there. But that's the start of IDC. But we had to get people in there, and you had all these, to get it implemented and to prove that Inuvialuit were ready, willing and able to be involved meaningfully in the changing North and economy. Good enough?